Get out of my house, paying the bills does not make you family. Those words rang in my ears as my mother Patricia slapped me across the face on Christmas Eve. My father Otis whispered from the corner, "You are just jealous of your sister and her husband." I looked at my brother-in-law Kyle, a white man sitting at the head of our table smirking as he swirled the vintage wine I had paid for. They thought they had broken me. They thought I would beg for forgiveness. They did not know that with a single tap on my phone, I could turn their warm, expensive holiday into a freezing nightmare. That night, I shut everything down. By morning, there were cops, tears, and absolute chaos. Before I tell you how I legally evicted my own parents, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the family bank account but treated like the family mistake. My name is Dante and I am 30 years old. To my family, I am a failure who plays on computers all day. To the rest of the world, I am a senior cloud solutions architect for one of the biggest tech companies in the world, earning over $250,000 a year. But on this Christmas Eve, none of that mattered. The dining room of my parents' house in Atlanta was decorated like a magazine cover. Gold ribbons, crystal glasses, and the smell of rosemary roasted turkey filled the air. It was perfect. It was expensive. And I had paid for every single inch of it. Yet I was sitting at the far end of the table, squeezed between a decorative vase and the wall while Kyle sat at the head of the table. Kyle, my 28-year-old brother-in-law, was holding the carving knife like he was King Arthur pulling the sword from the stone. So Dante Kyle said his voice loud enough to carry over the jazz music playing in the background. "Still fixing computers in your basement?" I took a sip of water, trying to ignore the condescending tone he always used. "I work in cloud architecture, Kyle. I build server infrastructures." Kyle laughed a dry, dismissive sound. "Right. The cloud. Look, if things get tight and I know the gig economy is tough, I have an opening for a security guard at the new luxury complex I am selling. It is night shift, but it pays $15 an hour. Good, honest work." My mother Patricia clasped her hands together and beamed at him. "Oh, Kyle, you are always so generous. Did you hear that Dante Kyle is offering to help you get a real job? You should be grateful." I gripped my fork until my knuckles turned white. Real job. I wanted to tell them that my quarterly bonus was more than Kyle made in 2 years. I wanted to tell them that the suit Kyle was wearing was likely bought with the credit card I paid off last month. But I stayed silent. I had learned a long time ago that in this house, logic did not matter. Image was everything. And to my mother, having a white son-in-law who called himself a real estate developer was the ultimate status symbol. It proved she had made it. It proved her family was elite. My sister Ebony, who was sitting next to Kyle, finally looked up from her phone. She had been live streaming the turkey carving for her 3,000 followers. She rolled her eyes at me. "Don't embarrass us tonight, Dante. Kyle is just trying to be nice. You know you have been wearing that same hoodie for 3 years. It is depressing." I looked down at my cashmere hoodie. It cost $600, but to them it looked like gym clothes. Kyle, on the other hand, was wearing a polyester suit that was too tight in the shoulders, but it was shiny, so to my mother it meant success. "Let's just eat, my dad," Otis mumbled, keeping his eyes on his plate. He used to be the head of this table. He used to be the provider. But since he retired without a pension, he had faded into the wallpaper, letting Mom and her delusions of grandeur run the show. The dinner continued with Kyle talking non-stop about his big deals. He talked about million-dollar listings and exclusive clients. I knew it was all hot air. I had done a quick search on him weeks ago. He had not sold a single property in 24 months. He was drowning in debt. But watching my mother hang on his every word was painful. She looked at him with the adoration she had never shown me, not even when I graduated with honors, not even when I bought her this house. Technically, the house was under an LLC I controlled, but I let them pretend it was theirs to save their pride. That was my mistake. After dinner came the gift exchange. This was always the worst part. I reached under the tree and pulled out a small, flat orange box. I handed it to Mom. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said softly. She took it, feeling the weight. She opened it carelessly, pulling out the silk scarf inside. It was a vintage Hermes pattern she had admired in a magazine months ago. I had spent weeks tracking it down, $400 for a piece of fabric just to see her smile. "Oh," she said, her voice flat. "A scarf. That is nice, Dante. Is this from that outlet store downtown? The colors seem a bit faded." "It is vintage, Mom. It is Hermes." She tossed it onto the sofa next to her without a second glance. "Well, thank you. It will be good for dusting, I suppose." My heart sank. Then Kyle stood up. He cleared his throat and handed Mom a sleek white envelope. "We wanted to do something special this year," Kyle announced, putting his arm around Ebony. "Something that matches the class and elegance of this family." Mom tore open the envelope. Her eyes went wide. She screamed a high-pitched sound of pure delight that pierced my ears. "A cruise, a Caribbean cruise, oh my God." She jumped up and hugged Kyle, burying her face in his cheap suit. "Oh, thank you, thank you. This is what I have always dreamed of, 5 stars. Look. Otis, look." Dad looked at the voucher, smiling weakly. "That is very generous, son." I leaned forward, looking at the logo on the voucher. Royal Caribbean, VIP Suite. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. 3 days ago, I had received a fraud alert on the authorized user credit card I gave Ebony for emergencies. A charge for $5,000. I had approved it because I thought maybe it was a medical emergency or car repair. They bought the gift with my money. I looked at Kyle. He caught my eye and winked. A smug, arrogant wink that said, "I got you." Mom was wiping tears from her eyes. Ebony was filming her reaction, shouting into her phone, "My husband is the best level up season." Mom turned to me, her face flushed with joy, but when her eyes landed on me, the warmth vanished. "See, Dante? This is what a real man does. He provides experiences. He honors his mother. He does not just buy old rags from a discount bin." The air in the room felt suddenly very thin. I stood up. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but hard. "Kyle did not pay for that cruise." The room went silent. Ebony stopped recording. "Excuse me," Kyle said, his smile dropping. "I said you did not pay for it. That voucher was charged to the American Express card ending in 4055. That is the card I pay for. The card I gave Ebony for emergencies." Mom looked from me to Kyle, then back to me, her face twisted in anger. "Why do you always have to ruin everything? Why are you so jealous?" "I am not jealous, Mom. I am tired. I am tired of being the bank while he plays the billionaire." Kyle laughed, shaking his head. "You are unbelievable. I am waiting on a commission check that will cover that 10 times over. I just used the card for the booking points. I was going to pay you back." "God, you are so petty. $5,000 is nothing to people like us, right, Patricia?" Mom nodded vigorously. "Exactly. Kyle is a businessman, Dante. Cash flow is complicated. You would not understand because you work for an hourly wage." "I do not work for an hourly wage," I shouted, finally losing my cool. "And it is not just the cruise. Who do you think paid for this turkey? Who pays the electric bill that powers these lights? Who paid off your $19,000 credit card debt yesterday so you would not get sued by the bank?" I slammed my hand on the table. The crystal glasses rattled. "I paid it. Me. The failure in the hoodie." Dad looked up, shock on his face. 19,000. "Patricia, you said you handled that with your savings." "Shut up," Otis, Mom snapped at him. Then she turned to me, her eyes burning with a hatred I had never seen before. She walked up to me. I thought she was going to yell. Instead, she drew back her hand and slapped me. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. My cheek burned. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you throw money in my face in my own house? You think buying a turkey gives you the right to disrespect my son? Your son, I whispered, touching my cheek. I am your son. No, she spat. You are a bitter, ungrateful little boy. Kyle is a man. Kyle treats me like a queen. You are just a wallet with a bad attitude. Kyle stepped forward, chest puffed out. You heard her, Dante. You are upsetting the family. Maybe you should leave. I looked at Dad. He looked down at his shoes. He was not going to save me. I looked at Ebony. She was busy typing a caption, probably something about toxic family members. Okay, I said. The burning on my cheek was fading into a cold, numb resolve. You want me to leave, fine. Get out! Mom screamed, pointing at the door. And do not come back until you learn to respect your superiors. This is my house. These are my rules. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Your house. Right. I walked to the closet and grabbed my coat. I did not look back at the table. I did not look at the untouched food or the Hermes scarf crumpled on the sofa. I opened the heavy oak front door. The winter air hit me biting and cold. Snow was falling softly on the driveway. As I stepped out, Kyle called out one last thing. Hey, Dante. Don't worry about the bill for the cruise. Consider it a tax for being a loser. The door slammed shut behind me. I walked down the driveway, my boots crunching on the snow. My Tesla was parked 2 blocks away because Mom did not want it blocking the view of the Lexus. Kyle had driven over the Lexus I was paying the lease on. I got into my car. It was freezing inside. I sat there for a moment watching the warm glow of the house windows. I could see their silhouettes moving around. They were probably toasting to getting rid of me. They were drinking my wine, eating my food, basking in the heat of the furnace I paid to repair last month. Mom said paying the bills does not make you family. Silence is a heavy thing. Inside the cabin of my Tesla Model S, the silence was absolute. The double-pane glass blocked out the wind howling through the Georgia pines, and the electric engine was dormant. I was parked 2 streets over, tucked into the shadows of an old oak tree, just close enough to see the roofline of my parents' house glowing against the night sky. It looked like a postcard. It looked like the American dream. Warm golden light spilled from every window, casting long shadows on the pristine snow that covered the lawn. I paid a landscaping crew $500 a month to maintain. I sat there for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel, watching the steam of my breath fog up the windshield. My cheek still throbbed where my mother had slapped me. The physical pain was a dull ache, but the emotional clarity was sharp, like a knife edge. For years, I had told myself that their behavior was just tough love. I told myself that because I was the one who made it out, the one who navigated the corporate ladder and cracked the code of Silicon Valley, it was my duty to lift them up. I thought paying the bills was a language of love. I thought if I just bought enough comfort, eventually they would respect the architect of that comfort. I was wrong. To them, I was not the architect. I was just the foundation. And nobody thinks about the foundation until it cracks. Tonight, the foundation was not just cracking, it was disappearing completely. I reached over to the passenger seat and flipped open my MacBook Pro. The screen came to life, the harsh blue light illuminating the dark interior of the car. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I was not angry anymore. Rage burns hot and fast, but this was something else. This was cold. This was a business decision. I was a cloud solutions architect. My entire career was built on optimizing systems, removing inefficiencies, and shutting down redundant processes. And as I looked at that house, I realized it was the most inefficient system I had ever managed. Time to execute the shutdown protocol. First up was the communication network. I navigated to the Verizon business portal. I had added my parents and Ebony to my plan 5 years ago. It was the Unlimited Platinum Global Plan. It cost me nearly $400 a month because Ebony insisted she needed high-speed data for her content creation career. I pulled up the usage dashboard. Sure enough, there was a massive spike in data upload happening right now. Ebony, she was undoubtedly live streaming. I could picture her perfectly. She would be sitting in the living room, probably holding up the new iPhone 15 Pro Max I had bought her for her birthday, complaining to her followers about how her toxic brother tried to ruin Christmas. She would be milking the drama for engagement, painting herself as the victim, while sitting in a heated house eating food she did not pay for. I clicked on her line. The interface asked me a simple question. Do you want to suspend this line? I did not hesitate. I selected Report lost, stolen. It was the fastest way to kill the signal immediately without a confirmation text sent to her phone. Confirm suspension. Click. I leaned back, imagining the scene. 1 second she is ranting to her 3,000 followers, the likes and comments rolling in, feeding her ego. The next second, the screen freezes. The signal bars drop to 0. The no service icon appears in the top corner. She would tap the screen confused. She would toggle airplane mode. She would scream, "Mom, the Wi-Fi is acting up." But the Wi-Fi would not save her, not tonight. I moved to the next tab. American Express. This was the big one. My Platinum card account. I had added my mother and Ebony as authorized users 3 years ago for emergencies. I scrolled through the recent transactions. Emergencies. There was a charge from yesterday, $400 at a liquor store. That must be the vintage wine Kyle was drinking. There was a charge from this morning, $200 at a gourmet bakery. There was a pending charge from 2 hours ago, $5,000, Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. Seeing the numbers in black and white made my stomach turn. It was not just the money. I made enough money that $5,000 did not break me. It was the audacity. It was the theft disguised as entitlement. They viewed my credit limit as their birthright. I clicked on the Manage Authorized Users tab. Patricia Williams, freezing card. Reason card compromised. Ebony Williams, freezing card. Reason card compromised. I also saw a third card. Household expenses. I had left this physical card in the kitchen drawer for groceries. I clicked on the transaction history. Gas station. Gas station. Men's Warehouse Kyle. He had been using the grocery card to buy his cheap suits. I froze that one too. Inside the house, the notifications would be starting to roll in. Modern banking is fast. Their phones, if they were connected to the Wi-Fi, would light up with alerts. Transaction declined. Card suspended. Contact your financial institution. But they could not contact the institution because their phones were dead bricks. I took a deep breath. The air in the car was getting colder, but I did not turn on the heat. I wanted to feel it. I wanted to feel the cold so I could understand what I was about to do to them. I opened a new tab. The Google Home and Nest ecosystem dashboard. This was my masterpiece. When I bought the house back from the bank and let them move in, I wanted them to be safe and comfortable. I installed a state-of-the-art smart home system. Nest thermostats in every room to regulate the temperature perfectly. Philips Hue smart bulbs in every fixture so Mom could adjust the lighting with her voice and never stumble in the dark. Smart locks on the doors so they never had to fumble for keys. Everything was connected to the central hub. Everything was controlled by my master admin account. I looked at the dashboard. Living room temperature 72 degrees, fireplace mode active, lighting scene. Holiday warmth. It looked so cozy on the screen, a little digital representation of the warmth I provided. I thought about the scarf Mom had thrown on the couch. I thought about Kyle sitting in my chair. I thought about my father looking at his shoes while his wife slapped his son. "Hey, Google," I whispered to the empty car. "Turn out the lights." I didn't use voice command, of course. I used my cursor. I selected the all lighting group. I dragged the brightness slider from 100% down to 0. I looked out the windshield. Instantaneously, the house went dark. It was shocking how fast it happened. 1 second, the windows were glowing squares of yellow light. The next, they were black voids. The Christmas tree in the bay window vanished. The porch lights died. The entire house disappeared into the gloom of the night, leaving only the moonlight reflecting off the snow on the roof. I could see the faint flicker of flashlights moving frantically inside the windows a few seconds later. They were panicking. They probably thought a transformer had blown. They would be checking the breaker box right now, but the breakers were fine. The electricity was flowing. The bulbs were just commanded to stay dark. Now for the heat. Atlanta winters are not the Arctic, but tonight was an anomaly. A polar vortex had dipped down, pushing temperatures into the low 20s. It was freezing. Without heat, that big, poorly insulated colonial house would turn into an icebox within hours. I clicked on the Nest thermostat controls. Current setting 72 degrees. Target setting off. I hesitated. Was this too far? Was this dangerous? Then I remembered Kyle's voice. Consider it a tax for being a loser. I dragged the setting to eco mode and set the safety floor to 45 degrees. Just enough to keep the pipes from bursting, but cold enough to require a heavy coat inside. I locked the panel with a PIN code so they could not manually override it from the wall unit. The fans inside the house would be spinning down right now. The silence in the living room would be deafening. No humming of the heater, no jazz music, no internet, just the dark and the cold creeping in from the walls. I had one last thing to do. The garage. My Lexus GX 550. The car Kyle drove around town like he owned it. It was a lease in my name. I had given him the spare key, for emergencies, when his old Honda broke down, and he had simply never given it back. I opened the Lexus app on my phone. Vehicle status parked, fuel level 40%, location 124 Maple Drive. I tapped the Stolen Vehicle Assistance feature. This was a nuclear option. It flagged the car in the system. It disabled the ignition. Even if he had the key fob, the push-to-start button would be dead. And it sent a signal to the local police dispatch that the vehicle was in unauthorized possession. I did not call the cops yet. I would let the morning handle that. For now, I just wanted to ensure he couldn't leave. He couldn't load up the car and take everyone to a hotel on my dime. They were trapped. Trapped in the house I bought in the dark I created with the debts they incurred. I closed my laptop. The blue light vanished, plunging me back into darkness. I started my Tesla. The screen hummed to life, showing the navigation route to my apartment in the city, my real sanctuary where the bills were paid, the heat was on, and nobody looked at me with contempt. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced one last time at the house in the rearview mirror. It was a black shape against the trees, a dead thing. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Mom. It must have finally gone through as a standard SMS, since iMessage was down for them. Dante, the power is out. The heat is off. Fix it. Kyle says you did something to the Wi-Fi. Answer me. Then another one. Dante, I command you to answer. It is freezing in here. How could you do this on Christmas? I looked at the message preview on my dashboard screen. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was relief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scrambling to fix their problems. I wasn't rushing to save them. I tapped the Do Not Disturb button on the screen. Then I navigated to the Contact Mom and selected Block Caller. I did the same for Dad and Ebony and Kyle. The silence in the car returned, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt like freedom. I drove toward the highway, leaving the chaos behind me. I knew the morning would bring a storm. I knew Kyle would try to spin this. I knew the police would be involved. But I was ready. I had the receipts. I had the contracts. I had the truth. They wanted a cold Christmas. They got one. As I merged onto the interstate, I turned on my own heated seat and played my favorite playlist. The first song that came on was The Payback. I smiled. The real show was just beginning. 10 minutes. That is exactly how long it took for the veneer of high society to crack inside the house on Maple Drive. From my parked car 2 streets away, I imagined the scene unfolding with cinematic clarity, aided by the frantic text messages that were still bouncing off my blocked phone. I knew the layout of that house better than anyone. I knew where the shadows fell, and I knew exactly how thin the insulation was in the living room. Inside, the darkness was absolute. The blackout curtains which Mom had insisted upon to keep the sun from fading her expensive rugs were now doing an excellent job of blocking out the moonlight. The sudden plunge from warm golden holiday cheer into pitch blackness must have been disorienting. I could picture my mother freezing in place, her hand halfway to her mouth with a glass of wine waiting for the backup generator to kick in. But there was no backup generator. I had suggested buying one 3 years ago. I even sent them a link to a high-end Generac system. Kyle had laughed at the idea. He told Mom that generators were for people in the boonies, not for a prestigious subdivision like theirs. He said the grid here was bulletproof. "Welcome to the bullet, Kyle." Patricia Otis called out, his voice likely trembling. "Why are the lights out?" "It is just a fuse." Mom would snap, her voice shrill. "Otis, go check the breaker box in the basement. Kyle, use your phone light." I imagined my father stumbling through the dark, banging his shins against the overpriced ottoman that served no purpose other than to look good. He would make his way to the basement, flip the switches back and forth, and realize with sinking dread that the breakers were not tripped. The power was flowing to the house perfectly fine. The house just refused to use it. Upstairs, the panic would be starting to set in. Not because of the dark, but because of the silence. The hum of the refrigerator was gone. The whir of the heater fan had stopped. The ambient noise of a modern home had vanished, leaving only the sound of their own breathing, and then the cold began to creep in. The house was big, with vaulted ceilings that trapped heat in the rafters. Without the forced air system pumping warm air constantly, the temperature dropped rapidly. The polar vortex outside was relentless. The frost was already beginning to create intricate icy patterns on the window panes. "Kyle," Mom screamed, "do something. Call the power company. Tell them who we are. Tell them to get a truck out here immediately. I am on it," Patricia Kyle said. I could hear the arrogance in his voice, even in my imagination. He probably smoothed his suit jacket in the dark, trying to look in control. He pulled out his latest iPhone, the one he leased on a plan he never paid for. He tapped the screen. He swiped. He tapped again. "That is weird," he muttered. What Mom demanded. "My call won't go through," Kyle said. "It says call failed." "Try again," Mom shrieked. "I am trying. There is no service. 0 bars. It says SOS only." "What do you mean, no service?" Mom yelled. "We live in the city. We have the best plan. Dante pays for the—" She stopped. The name hung in the air like a curse word. Dante. Otis. She pivoted her anger toward my father. "Use your phone. I checked mine too," Dad said, his voice coming from the hallway. "Dead. No signal," Ebony Mom cried out. "I can't even get on Instagram," Ebony wailed. "The Wi-Fi is gone. I was in the middle of a stream. I am going to lose followers." "Mom, do you know how bad this looks? People will think we are poor." The irony was delicious. They were poor, they were destitute, they just had high credit limits and a son they liked to abuse. By now the temperature inside would have dropped into the 50s. My mother, wearing only a thin silk dress to show off her figure, would be starting to shiver. She would reach for the Hermes scarf she had discarded earlier, wrapping it around her shoulders, wishing she had appreciated the warmth of the wool instead of the label on the box. "Otis, start a fire," Mom commanded. "We need heat." Right, Dad said. This was the part I had been waiting for. The fireplace in the living room was the centerpiece of the house. It was a massive stone structure that looked rugged and authentic. But like everything else in their lives, it was cosmetic. It was a gas fireplace with ceramic logs. It required an electronic ignition switch to open the valve and spark the flame. An ignition switch that was controlled by the smart home hub. I pictured Dad fumbling in the dark, grabbing the remote control for the fireplace. Click, click, click. Nothing. It is not working, Dad said, panic rising in his voice. The pilot light is out. Well, light it manually, Mom screamed. You are a man, aren't you? Figure it out. Dad would grab a lighter from the kitchen drawer. He would stick his hand into the cold firebox, trying to find a gas valve that did not exist in a manual form. He would click the lighter until his thumb was sore. But without the solenoid opening the line, a command I had disabled, there was no gas. There was no fire. Maybe we can burn something, Dad suggested desperately. We have wood in the garage. No, Mom shouted. That is decorative birch. It is full of chemicals, and the flue is electronic. Otis, if we burn wood and the flue does not open, we will die of carbon monoxide poisoning. She was right. For once, her knowledge of her expensive accessories saved them. The flue damper was indeed electronic, and it was currently locked shut. So they sat there, the darkness pressing in, the cold seeping through the floorboards, the realization that their fortress of luxury was actually a prison of technology they did not understand and could not control. We cannot stay here, Kyle announced. His voice was loud, trying to regain authority. It is going to be 20 degrees tonight. We will freeze. Where are we going to go? Dad asked. The Ritz-Carlton, Kyle said. I know the manager. I will get us a suite. We will order room service and laugh about this in the morning when the power company apologizes. Oh, thank God, Mom said. Thank God for you, Kyle. A man with a plan. Let's go. Everyone to the car. I saw the flashlight beams bobbing through the windows as they moved toward the garage. They were huddled together, clutching their coats. I imagined them walking past the photos on the wall, photos of Kyle and Ebony, photos of Mom receiving awards at church. No photos of me. They reached the garage. This was the moment of truth. The garage door opener was, of course, electric. Dad hit the button on the wall. Silence. The manual release. Otis, pull the cord. Mom barked. Dad yanked the red emergency cord. With a heavy groan, he lifted the garage door. The cold wind from outside rushed in, swirling around their ankles. Get in the Lexus, Kyle ordered. I will drive. They piled into the Lexus GX 550. It was a beautiful car. Luxurious leather seats, heated steering wheel, powerful engine. A symbol of status. Kyle sat in the driver's seat. He adjusted the mirror. He looked at Mom in the passenger seat and smiled reassuringly. Do not worry, Patricia. I will have you drinking hot cocoa in 20 minutes. He pressed the brake pedal. He pushed the start button. Silence. Not a click. Not a whir. The dashboard remained completely black. Kyle pressed it again. Harder. Come on, he muttered. What is wrong? Mom asked, her teeth chattering. I do not know. Kyle said, frustration leaking into his voice. It is dead. The battery must be dead. How can the battery be dead? Dad asked from the back seat. It is a brand new car. Kyle slammed his hand against the steering wheel. It is this cold. It kills batteries. Or maybe the starter is frozen. He tried again, and again. He mashed the button with his thumb until it turned white. He screamed at the car. Start. You piece of junk, start. But the Lexus was not a piece of junk. It was a sophisticated machine with an advanced anti-theft system. And right now, that system believed the car was stolen. The immobilizer was active. The fuel pump was cut. The car was nothing more than a 2-ton paperweight. Try your car, Ebony, Kyle yelled. My car is in the shop, Ebony cried. Remember I sideswiped that mailbox last week? They sat there in the dead Lexus inside the freezing garage with the wind howling through the open door. The smell of expensive leather mixed with the scent of fear. This is impossible, Mom whispered. Everything is breaking. The lights, the heat, the phones, the car. It is like we are cursed. It is just bad luck, Patricia, Kyle insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. It is a massive infrastructure failure. The grid surged and fried the house electronics and the car. That has to be it. We just need to wait it out. Wait it out, Mom screamed. We will freeze to death. We have blankets, Dad said softly. We have the down comforters. We can huddle in the living room. Body heat. And so the great escape failed. The family that prided themselves on mobility, on access, on having the world at their fingertips, was forced to retreat back into the dark shell of their home. I watched as the garage door was manually pulled shut. I saw the flashlight beams retreat back into the house. They gathered in the living room. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were pulling the $3,000 Egyptian cotton duvet off the master bed. They were piling onto the restoration hardware sofa. Kyle the golden boy was useless. He could not sell a house. He could not fix a fuse. He could not start a car. He could only sit there and complain. Ebony was useless. She could not influence the temperature. She could not stream her misery. She could only whine. And Mom was realizing that her king, her prince, and her princess were powerless. The only person who knew how to make the house work, the only person who understood the systems, the only person who paid the bills that kept the monsters at bay was the person she had slapped and thrown out into the snow. But they still did not blame me. Their arrogance was a shield. They were blaming the city. They were blaming the weather. They were blaming the manufacturer of the Lexus. I put my car in drive. I had seen enough. The house was dark. The lesson had begun. They were going to have a long, cold night to think about what family really means. They were going to learn that heat is a privilege, not a right. They were about to discover that when you cut off the hand that feeds you, you starve. I drove away, leaving them to their darkness. But I knew the morning would bring a different kind of heat. Because when the sun came up and Kyle tried to explain this to the authorities, the real nightmare would begin. I turned up the volume on my music. The heater in my Tesla was working perfectly. It was going to be a very comfortable night for me. The silence in their house would soon be broken by sirens. And I intended to have a front row seat for that show too. Christmas morning usually brings the smell of cinnamon rolls and the sound of wrapping paper being torn apart. But at the house on Maple Drive, the only thing tearing apart was my family's sanity. The sun rose over a frozen kingdom. Inside the colonial mansion, the temperature had dropped to 42 degrees. My mother Patricia was huddled under 3 blankets on the sofa wearing her mink coat that she usually saved for Easter service. Her breath came out in visible puffs of white mist. My father Otis was shivering in the armchair wearing 2 pairs of golf pants and a beanie cap. And then there was Kyle. My brother-in-law was pacing the living room floor, fueled by a mixture of adrenaline and pure, unadulterated rage. He looked terrible. His cheap suit was wrinkled from sleeping in it. His hair was a mess. He was holding his dead iPhone like it was a weapon that had jammed. "We are not going to let him get away with this," Kyle shouted, his voice cracking. "This is attempted murder. He is trying to freeze us to death. He stole my car. He hacked my bank accounts. This is domestic terrorism." "Kyle, please." Mom chattered, her teeth clicking together. "Just fix it." "I am going to fix it," Kyle declared. "I am going to put that little nerd in prison for the rest of his life." He stormed to the front door and threw it open. He marched across the snow-covered lawn to Mrs. Higgins' house next door. Mrs. Higgins was the neighborhood watch captain, a woman who spent her entire life peeking through her blinds. She must have been thrilled to see the drama unfolding at the perfect Williams residence. I imagined the conversation. Kyle banging on her door at 7 in the morning. Mrs. Higgins answering in her bathrobe. Kyle begging to use her landline because we have been hacked by a cybercriminal. 10 minutes later, Kyle returned a triumphant smirk on his frozen face. "The police are on their way," he announced. "I told them everything. I told them Dante Williams has compromised our security systems, stolen a $70,000 vehicle, and is holding us hostage in our own home by manipulating the environmental controls. They are treating it as a high priority." Mom let out a sigh of relief. "Good, good. When the police see what he has done, Dante will be in handcuffs before breakfast." Across the city in the heart of downtown Atlanta, my morning was starting very differently. I woke up naturally without an alarm. The temperature in my penthouse suite was a perfect 70 degrees. I walked to the kitchen, my bare feet sinking into the heated marble floors. I placed a pod in my espresso machine, a commercial-grade Italian model that cost more than my father's first car, and watched the dark, rich liquid fill the cup. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. From the 45th floor, the city looked peaceful under a blanket of snow. I could see the traffic crawling on the highway, tiny ants marching in the cold. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like victory. My phone on the counter was silent. I had left the block feature on. I did not need to hear their screaming. I knew exactly what was happening. Kyle was predictable. He was a man who believed the world owed him everything, and when the world said no, he called the manager. In this case, the manager was the police department. I was expecting them. I went to my server room. Yes, I have a server room in my apartment. It is a small climate-controlled space where I run my personal cloud infrastructure and host private servers for a few high-profile freelance clients. The blue lights of the racks hummed softly. I pulled up the security feed from my parents' house. The cameras were still recording locally even though I had cut their access to the feed. I saw a patrol car pull up to the house, then another, Officer Miller and Officer Davis. I recognized the uniforms. Atlanta PD. I watched Kyle run out of the house waving his arms like a maniac. He was pointing at the garage. He was pointing at the dark windows. He was playing the victim perfectly. I checked the time. It would take them about 20 minutes to get here if Kyle gave them my address. I had time for a shower. 30 minutes later, the buzzer rang. The concierge from the lobby called up. "Mr. Williams, there are 2 police officers here to see you. They say it is urgent." "Send them up, Earl," I said calmly. I was dressed in a casual cashmere sweater and dark jeans. I looked nothing like the basement-dwelling hacker Kyle had surely described. I looked like what I was, a man who built the systems the world runs on. When the knock came, it was heavy and authoritative. "Police, open up." I opened the heavy mahogany door. Officer Miller and Officer Davis stood there. Their hands were resting near their belts, their postures tense. They were ready for a confrontation. They were ready for a scruffy, angry criminal. Instead, they saw the expansive, open-concept living room behind me. They saw the 60-inch OLED screens displaying market data. They saw the view of the skyline. They saw the art on the walls. Real art, not prints. Officer Miller blinked. He looked at the paper in his hand, then at the apartment number, then back at me. "Dante Williams," he asked, his voice losing some of its edge. "That is me, officers," I said, stepping aside. "Please come in. It is cold out there. Can I offer you some coffee?" The officers stepped inside, their boots squeaking on the polished floor. They looked around, clearly disoriented. This did not fit the profile of the disturbance call they had just taken. "We are not here for coffee," Mr. Williams, Officer Davis said, though he was eyeing the espresso machine. "We received a serious complaint from a Mr. Kyle Jenkins and Mrs. Patricia Williams regarding a domestic disturbance and theft." I nodded slowly, walking over to the kitchen island. I leaned against the marble counter, crossing my arms. "Let me guess," I said. "They told you I hacked their home cut. Their power froze their bank accounts and stole a Lexus GX 550. Officer Miller narrowed his eyes. "So you admit it," I chuckled softly. "Officers, I want you to look around this apartment. Does it look like I need to steal a Lexus?" "That is not the point," Miller said, stepping forward. "Possession of a stolen vehicle is a felony. Mr. Jenkins claims you used a digital device to disable the car and prevent him from leaving the premises. He also claims you have illegally accessed their home automation system to endanger the welfare of the occupants." I reached for a leather folder sitting on the counter. I had prepared it the night before. I slid it across the marble toward them. "Officer, before you arrest me, I would like you to look at 3 documents in that folder." Miller hesitated, then opened the folder. "The first document," I said, pointing to the paper, "is the lease agreement for the Lexus GX 550. Who is listed as the lessee?" Miller squinted at the paper. Dante Williams. And who is listed as the primary payer, Dante Williams? Exactly, I said. Mr. Jenkins is not on the lease. He is not on the insurance. I allowed him to borrow the car as a favor. Last night he became abusive and threatened me. So as the legal owner of the vehicle, I revoked his permission to use it. I reported it as unauthorized use to the leasing company, and they disabled it. You cannot steal your own car, officer. Miller looked at Davis. He flipped to the next page. This is the deed to the house at 124 Maple Drive, I continued. Or rather, the property ownership records. You will see it is owned by Second Chance Holdings, LLC. And who owns that LLC? Davis asked. I pulled up the corporate registration on my iPad and showed it to them. My face, my name, 100% ownership. My parents live there rent-free, I explained. I pay the mortgage, I pay the property taxes. And most importantly, look at the third document, the utility bills. Miller looked at the stack of bills. Electric, gas, water, internet. All of them had my name on them. Dante Williams. I paid the electric bill for 5 years, officer. I paid for the internet that Mr. Jenkins uses to play video games. I paid for the gas that heats the house. Last night my mother assaulted me. She slapped me in the face and told me to get out of her house. She told me I was not family. She told me that paying the bills did not make me family. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. So I agreed with her. If I am not family, then I am just a service provider. And since they are not paying customers and they were abusive to the provider, I terminated the service. Officer Davis looked up from the papers. His jaw was slightly open. You turned off the power because it is in your name. I canceled the service plan, I corrected. I suspended the accounts. Just like Netflix would do if you stopped paying. Just like the power company would do. I just did it faster. But it is freezing in there, Miller said. They said it is 40 degrees. I shrugged. I did not turn off the shelter. The roof is still there. The walls are still there. They have blankets. If they want heat, they can call the utility company and open an account in their own name. If they want internet, they can sign a contract. If they want to drive, they can buy a car. Officer Miller closed the folder. He looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something closer to respect mixed with a little bit of fear. So the credit cards, Miller asked. Authorized users, I said simply, my account, my money. I froze them because I detected fraudulent charges. Mr. Jenkins attempted to charge a $5,000 cruise to my card without my permission. That is theft, officer. Attempted grand larceny. I haven't pressed charges yet because I was trying to be nice. Officer Davis let out a short, incredulous laugh. He shook his head. So let me get this straight, Davis said. This guy, this Kyle Jenkins, called us screaming that you are a hacker and a thief. But in reality, he is living in your house, driving your car, spending your money, and when you cut him off, he called 911. That sums it up, I said. Officer Miller took a deep breath. He handed the folder back to me. Mr. Williams, this is a civil matter. Exactly, I said. Miller adjusted his belt. He looked at Davis. We need to go back to Maple Drive, he said. Are you going to arrest me? I asked, taking another sip of my espresso. No, Miller said. But we are going to have a very long conversation with Mr. Jenkins about filing a false police report. And we are going to tell him to return the keys to your vehicle before we add auto theft to his list of problems. Thank you, officers, I said. Oh, and one more thing. They turned back at the door. If you go back there, please tell my mother that the hacker sends his regards. And tell her that the application fee for a new power account usually takes 48 hours to process. Officer Davis smirked. Have a nice day, Mr. Williams. Nice place you have here. I watched them leave. I watched them get into the elevator. I walked back to the window and looked down at the city. The police were on my side. The law was on my side. Kyle had tried to use the system to crush me, not realizing that I was the one who built the system. He thought he could bully me with badges and uniforms, but badges and uniforms respond to paperwork. They respond to ownership. I imagined the scene that was about to happen at Maple Drive. The officers walking back into that freezing house, Kyle standing there smug, expecting to see me in the back of the squad car, and instead the officers would look at him with the disdain reserved for parasites. They would tell him the truth. They would tell him that he owned nothing. They would tell him that the car was being towed. And Mom would hear it all. She would hear that the house she claimed was hers, the house she kicked me out of, belonged to the son she despised. I sat down at my computer. I had one more layer to peel back. The police visit was just the defense. Now it was time for the offense. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Private Investigation. I had hired a firm weeks ago, just a gut feeling that something about Kyle didn't add up. The report had arrived this morning. I clicked on the PDF. Kyle Jenkins, real estate license expired 2021. Civil lawsuits, 3 pending. Employment status unemployed. Known aliases, none but linked to a multi-level marketing scheme involving cryptocurrency. I leaned back in my chair. Kyle wasn't just a freeloader. He was a fraud. And he was currently trying to get my parents to sign some very interesting documents regarding investment capital. I looked at the freezing house on my security feed. "You want to play games, Kyle?" I whispered. "Let's play." I forwarded the private investigator's report to my lawyer. It was time to prepare for the final eviction. But first I was going to let them enjoy the cold for just a little bit longer. After all, it is Christmas, and misery loves company. The security cameras at 124 Maple Drive were equipped with cellular backup. I had installed that feature specifically for moments when the power went out during storms, but today it served a much more entertaining purpose. From the comfort of my heated office chair 40 miles away, I watched the final act of the morning play out on my high-definition monitor. It was better than any reality television show because the tears were real and the humiliation was absolute. The cul-de-sac was awake. In suburban neighborhoods like this, nothing travels faster than scandal. Mrs. Higgins, the neighborhood watch captain who lived directly across the street, was already standing on her porch. She was wearing her thick wool coat and pretending to sweep snow off her walkway, but her eyes were glued to my parents' driveway. 2 doors down, the Miller family was looking out their bay window. They had seen the police car arrive earlier, and they had seen it leave. Now that it was back accompanied by a massive flatbed tow truck, the entire street knew that the Williams family, the pillars of the community, were in serious trouble. The police cruiser pulled up to the curb first. Officers Miller and Davis stepped out. They did not look happy. Nobody likes filing paperwork for false reports, and they liked being lied to even less. Then came the tow truck. It was a beast of a machine, loud and smelling of diesel, a stark contrast to the manicured lawns and silent electric vehicles that usually populated the street. The driver backed it up right to the edge of the driveway, the reverse beeping sound cutting through the quiet morning air like a countdown clock. The front door of my parents' house flew open. Kyle marched out. He had clearly tried to fix his appearance, splashing some water on his face and smoothing his hair, but the panic was still visible in his eyes. He was grinning a tight, desperate smile. He thought the police had returned to give him good news. He thought I was in the back seat of the cruiser. "Officers," Kyle called out, striding down the icy walkway in his dress shoes. "I see you brought backup to take the vehicle into evidence. Did you arrest him? Is Dante in custody?" Officer Miller stopped at the edge of the driveway. He rested his hand on his belt and looked at Kyle with a flat, unimpressed stare. "Mr. Jenkins," the officer said, his voice loud enough for Mrs. Higgins to hear across the street. "We are not here to arrest anyone. We are here to facilitate the recovery of property for its rightful owner." Kyle froze. The smile vanished. "What are you talking about? I am the owner." "Well, my wife and I are the primary drivers." The officer shook his head. "No, sir, you are not. We have reviewed the lease agreement provided by Mr. Williams. This vehicle is leased solely in his name. He has reported unauthorized use and requested immediate repossession. Kyle turned pale. That is a lie. He gave me that car. It was a gift. It is a lease, Mr. Jenkins, Officer Davis interjected. You cannot gift a lease without a transfer of liability. And since you have no credit history to speak of, that transfer never happened. Now we need the keys. Kyle stepped back, blocking the path to the Lexus GX 550. This is ridiculous. You cannot take my car. I have meetings today. I have clients to meet. This is my livelihood. The tow truck driver, a large man with a beard and a neon yellow vest, hopped out of the cab. He didn't care about meetings. He had a work order. He started unspooling the chains from the back of the truck. The metal clanking sound was harsh and final. Kyle spun around to scream at the driver. Hey, do not touch that car. That is a $70,000 vehicle. Get away from it, sir. Officer Miller stepped forward, his voice dropping an octave. This is a lawful repossession. You have two choices. You can hand over the key fob peacefully, or we can let the operator drag it onto the bed, which might damage the transmission. Either way, the car is leaving. And if you obstruct us, we will arrest you for disorderly conduct. At that moment, my mother, Patricia, emerged from the house. She was wrapped in her mink coat, shivering violently from the cold house, but her face was flushed with indignation. She saw the neighbors watching. She saw Mrs. Higgins leaning on her broom. She saw the spectacle. "What is going on here?" Mom demanded, using her church committee voice. "Why is there a truck in my driveway? Officer, tell this man to leave immediately." "Ma'am," Officer Miller said, turning to her. "We are enforcing a repossession order initiated by your son, Dante." Dante. Mom spat the name out. "Dante has no right. He is having a tantrum. I am his mother. I command you to stop this." Officer Davis stepped in. "Mrs. Williams, being his mother, does not give you legal authority over his assets. You told us earlier that your son had hacked your life. The investigation shows that he simply stopped paying for things he owns. You cannot file a police report because someone stopped giving you free gifts. That is filing a false report, which is a crime. We are letting you off with a warning this time, but do not call 911 again unless there is an actual emergency." Mom looked like she had been slapped. She looked at the neighbors, then back at the officers. Her entire world was built on perception. She needed everyone to think she was rich, blessed, and in control. Now the police were lecturing her like a child, and the repo man was hooking chains to the symbol of her success. "Kyle, do something," Mom hissed. Kyle looked at the keys in his hand. He looked at the tow truck. He looked at the officers. He realized he had no power. The badge he tried to weaponize against me had turned against him. Defeated, he threw the key fob at Officer Miller. "Fine," Kyle shouted, his voice cracking. "Take it. It is a piece of junk anyway, the starter is broken." Officer Miller caught the keys and handed them to the tow truck driver. The driver got into the Lexus. He tried the start button. The engine roared to life immediately. Kyle's jaw dropped. It wouldn't start for me." The officer smirked. Mr. Williams remotely re-enabled the ignition for the recovery agent. "Seems the car works just fine, Mr. Jenkins. It just didn't want to work for you." The driver put the Lexus in neutral and drove it up onto the flatbed. The sight was devastating for Kyle. That car was his identity. It was how he tricked people into thinking he was a successful developer. Without it, he was just a guy in a cheap suit with no job and a mountain of debt. Mrs. Higgins across the street was not even pretending to sweep anymore. She had her phone out. She was recording. As the truck secured the Lexus, Mom realized the audience was watching. She knew she could not win the argument with the police. She needed a different tactic to save face. She needed sympathy. She put a hand to her forehead. She swayed dramatically. "Oh," she moaned loudly. "Oh, my heart. The stress. It is too much. Otis!" She yelled for my father, who was standing timidly in the doorway. "Otis, catch me." And then she fainted. It was a terrible performance. She crumbled slowly, making sure to land on a patch of snow that looked soft, careful not to get her mink coat too dirty. She lay there, eyes fluttered shut, waiting for the officers to rush to her aid. Kyle, seeing an opportunity to shift the narrative, dropped to his knees beside her. Mom. Mom. Oh my God, you killed her. You people killed her with this harassment. Officer Miller looked down at her. He didn't move. He had been a cop for 20 years. He knew a fake faint when he saw one. Mrs. Williams, the officer said calmly. The ground is very cold. If you stay down there, you might catch hypothermia. We can call an ambulance, but given the road conditions, it will cost about $2,000 for the transport. And since we know your insurance is likely tied to your son's employment. My mother's eyes snapped open. She sat up instantly. I am fine, she snapped, brushing snow off her coat. I just got dizzy. The neighbors laughed. I could see Mrs. Higgins' shoulders shaking with laughter. The tow truck driver finished securing the car. He hopped into his cab and honked the horn, a loud, rude blast that echoed through the subdivision. He pulled away, taking the Lexus with him. Officer Miller looked at Kyle and my mother one last time. Mr. Jenkins, Mrs. Williams, the next time we come out here, it better be because the house is on fire. Stop wasting taxpayer resources. And Mr. Jenkins, I suggest you find another way to get around. Uber is quite reliable. The officers got back in their cruiser and drove away. My family stood in the empty driveway. The spot where the Lexus had been was now just a patch of oil-stained concrete. The wind whipped around them. Kyle stood there, hands in his pockets, shivering. Mom glared at the neighbors until they went back inside. Then she turned on Kyle. You said you handled it, she hissed. You said the police would arrest him. Now look at us. We are the laughingstock of the neighborhood. It is not my fault, Kyle shouted back. He is crazy. Dante is a psychopath who controls a car from an app that should be illegal. Let's go inside, Dad said quietly from the porch. It is cold. They retreated back into the house. But the house offered no comfort. It was dark. It was 40 degrees. And now they were trapped. I watched them disappear behind the heavy front door. I took a sip of my coffee. The repossession was complete. Phase 1 of the dismantling was over. But I wasn't done. The police visit had confirmed something important. Kyle had mentioned meetings and clients. The private investigator's report on my desk said Kyle was unemployed. So who was he meeting? I opened the file again. I scanned the financial records the investigator had pulled. There were multiple transfers from elderly people in the church community into a crypto wallet linked to Kyle. Small amounts at first, $500. Then larger, $2,000. And then I saw it. A pending transfer authorization form. It was a photo Kyle had foolishly uploaded to his cloud storage, which was predictably part of the family plan I had admin access to. It was a reverse mortgage application for 124 Maple Drive. He was trying to get my parents to sign over the equity of the house to him. He was telling them it was an investment. He was going to steal the house, or at least he was trying to. He didn't know that he couldn't mortgage a house they didn't own. But the intent was there. The fraud was there. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. Amazing Amanda. Amanda, I said when she answered. I have the documents. He is running a Ponzi scheme through the church, and he is trying to defraud my parents. I can get an emergency injunction, Amanda said, her voice sharp and professional. But Dante, if we expose this, your parents are going to be implicated if they signed anything. I know, I said. That is why we are going to do it publicly. I want everything on the record. When Amanda asked. New Year's Eve, I said. The church is holding a watch night service. My mother never misses it. She wants to parade Kyle around as the prodigal son. Perfect, Amanda said. I will have the papers ready. I hung up. On the screen, the house on Maple Drive looked small and sad. They were cold. They were embarrassed. But they were still dangerous. Kyle was a cornered rat and my mother was a narcissist who had just lost her audience. They would strike back. They would try to destroy my reputation. Let them try. I dragged the private investigators folder into a new directory on my desktop. I renamed it The Nuke. Merry Christmas, family. Enjoy the silence while it lasts. While the tow truck was dragging Kyle's ego away on a flatbed, my sister Ebony was busy executing Plan B. In the modern world, if you cannot win in the court of law, you try to win in the court of public opinion. And Ebony, with her 3,000 followers and a desperate need for validation, was about to put on the performance of a lifetime. I was sitting in my home office reviewing some code for a client when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from TikTok. Someone had tagged me, then another, then 10 more. Within minutes, my phone was vibrating so constantly it was skittering across the marble desk. I picked it up and tapped the screen. There she was, Ebony. She was not at home huddled under blankets with our freezing parents. She was sitting in a booth at the Roasted Bean, a trendy coffee shop 3 blocks from our parents' house. She had positioned herself near a window so the natural light would catch the tears streaming down her face. She was wearing a beanie and an oversized sweatshirt, looking intentionally disheveled. I turned up the volume. A sad, slow piano track played in the background, a stock audio clip designed to elicit sympathy. "Hey guys," Ebony whispered into the camera, her voice trembling. "I did not want to make this video. I really didn't. But I don't know what else to do. I am literally shaking right now." She took a sip of what looked like a $6 oat milk latte, then wiped her nose with her sleeve. "My family is in danger," she continued, looking directly into the lens. "My brother, my own brother Dante Williams, has completely snapped. He is a computer genius and he used his skills to hack our smart home. He turned off the heat. He turned off the lights. He locked us out of our bank accounts." She paused for dramatic effect. "Guys, my parents are elderly. My dad has a heart condition. My mom is diabetic. It is 40 degrees inside our house right now. 40 degrees. And Dante does not care. He left them there to freeze. He left us with no food. He even disabled our car so we could not drive to a hospital or a shelter. We are trapped. We are starving. And he is sitting in his penthouse laughing at us." She leaned closer to the camera. "Please, if you are watching this, help us. We need legal aid. We need food. He is a monster. He makes hundreds of thousands of dollars, and he is trying to kill his family because of a petty argument over Christmas dinner. Please share this. Please tag his employer. We need justice." The video ended. I sat there stunned. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. She left out the part about the $19,000 debt I paid. She left out the part about Kyle stealing my car. She left out the fact that she was currently sitting in a warm cafe drinking expensive coffee instead of buying a space heater for the parents she claimed to be so worried about. I looked at the engagement numbers. The video had been up for 2 hours. It already had 50,000 views. The comments were scrolling by faster than I could read them. "He is trash. Call the cops on him. What is his job? Let's get him fired. Protect our elders. This is elder abuse." But the strangers on the internet were not the ones that hurt the most. It was the locals. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sister Patterson. Sister Patterson was the head usher at our family church. She was a woman who had known me since I was 5 years old. She was the woman who gave me peppermint candies during sermons. "Dante." The message read, "I just saw your sister's video. I am praying for your soul. How could you do this to your mother and father? The Bible says, honor thy father and thy mother. You are walking a dark path, son. Turn the heat back on before God turns his back on you." Then came a message from Deacon Jones. "Son, we are disappointed. This is not how a man of God behaves. We are organizing a food drive for your parents. Shame on you." One by one, the community I grew up in turned against me. These were people who never asked me about my career. They never asked how I was doing. They only knew what my mother told them, that I was the quiet, strange one, and Kyle was the golden son-in-law. Now they had proof of my wickedness. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reply to every single one of them with screenshots of the bills I paid. I wanted to show them the years of sacrifice. But I knew it wouldn't matter. In their eyes, the victim is always the one crying the loudest. Then the situation escalated from emotional to critical. My phone rang. The caller ID did not say Sister Patterson. It said Global Tech Solutions, HR. My stomach dropped. This was my employer. This was my livelihood. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and answered. This is Dante. Hello, Dante. This is Jennifer from Human Resources. Do you have a moment? Her voice was professional but icy. Yes, Jennifer. I have a moment. Dante, we have received a disturbing volume of emails and social media tags in the last hour regarding your conduct. There is a video circulating that alleges you are involved in domestic abuse and endangering the welfare of vulnerable adults. I closed my eyes. Ebony had actually done it. She had tagged my company. She was trying to get me fired. She would rather destroy my career, the very career that paid for her lifestyle, than admit she was wrong. Jennifer, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am aware of the video. It is being posted by my sister. I want to be very clear, these allegations are 100% false. This is a family dispute over financial boundaries. Dante, Jennifer interrupted. We have a strict code of conduct. We cannot have employees associated with criminal behavior or public scandals that damage the company's reputation. The allegations are that you used your technical skills you use for this company to hack a home and endanger lives. That is a serious compliance issue. I felt a flash of anger, but I pushed it down. Anger would get me fired. Facts would save me. Jennifer, I understand your concern. However, I did not hack anything. I am the legal owner of the property in question. I am the account holder for the utilities and smart home devices. I simply suspended services due to non-payment and abusive behavior from the tenants. I have a police report filed this morning regarding theft committed by the individuals in that video. The police have already investigated and determined no crime was committed on my part. There was silence on the other end of the line. You have a police report, she asked. Yes. I can email a copy to you right now. It states clearly that this is a civil matter and that I am the victim of theft and harassment. Okay, Jennifer said, her tone softening slightly. Send me that report immediately. And Dante, I would suggest you get this offline as soon as possible. If this continues to blow up, we might have to place you on administrative leave pending an investigation. We value you, but we have to protect the brand. Understood, I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. They had crossed the line. Attacking my character was one thing. Attacking my paycheck was an act of war. I opened my laptop. I forwarded the police report to HR. Then I sat back and stared at the ceiling. Ebony thought she was winning. She thought the likes and the sympathy comments were currency. She thought that by shaming me, she could force me to turn the money tap back on. She was wrong. She had just forced me to take the gloves off. I picked up my phone again. I scrolled past the hate messages from the church ladies. I scrolled past the threats from internet strangers. I found a number I had saved weeks ago but never used. It was for a private investigation firm called Shadowfax and Associates. I had done a preliminary background check on Kyle myself, finding the expired license and the debts. But now I needed more. I needed dirt. I needed the kind of information that ruins reputations and puts people in handcuffs. I hit dial. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, this is Dante Williams. We spoke last month about a potential deep dive into a subject named Kyle Jenkins. I remember Henderson said. The real estate guy who doesn't sell real estate. That is the one. I want to pull the trigger on the full package. Financial surveillance, digital footprint. Everything I said. I want to know where every dollar he spends comes from. I want to know who he talks to. I want to know if he has jaywalked in the last 5 years. And I need it fast. Henderson chuckled. Sounds like he made you mad. He tried to destroy my career, I said. I am done playing defense. I can have a preliminary dossier by tomorrow, Henderson said. But it will cost you. Rush fees are steep. Money is not an object, I told him. Just find me the smoking gun. I hung up. I looked back at the screen where Ebony's video was still looping. She was crying fake tears over a latte she bought with money she likely borrowed from a friend because I cut her credit cards. "Enjoy your viral moment, Ebony," I whispered. "Because when I am done with Kyle, there won't be a filter in the world that can hide the ugly truth." I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now, reflecting off the glass towers of Atlanta. I was alone, vilified, and under investigation by my own job. But I felt a strange sense of calm. The church ladies could pray for me all they wanted, but they should have been praying for Kyle. Because I wasn't just going to evict them from my house, I was going to evict them from their high horse. I went to the kitchen and poured myself another cup of coffee. Then I sat down at my workstation and opened a new document. I started drafting a cease and desist letter for defamation. And then I started drafting the eviction notice. The smear campaign was loud, messy, and emotional. My response would be silent, legal, and absolutely devastating. I checked my email. A notification from Henderson popped up. He worked fast. Subject: Kyle Jenkins. Initial flag. I opened it. There was a single attachment. A photo taken from a bank ATM surveillance camera 3 days ago. It showed Kyle depositing a thick stack of cash. The text below it read, "Subject made 5 cash deposits this week, totaling $9,000, source unknown." But cross-reference with local police reports shows 3 elderly members of your parents' church reported investment withdrawals on the same dates. I stared at the screen. He wasn't just a mooch. He was a predator. He was stealing from the very same church ladies who were currently texting me to call me a demon. A cold smile spread across my face. "Oh, Kyle, you picked the wrong family to scam." I forwarded the email to my lawyer. The game had just changed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about public service. And I was about to be the most helpful citizen this city had ever seen. The digital storm outside my apartment was raging. My phone continued to vibrate on the marble countertop, a relentless pulse of notifications from people who had never met me but hated my guts. Ebony's video had crossed 1 million views. I was trending on Twitter in Atlanta. People were calling for my resignation. People were calling for my arrest. But inside my office, the air was still, and the only light came from the 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle before me. I was not looking at social media anymore. I was looking at the truth. The email from Henderson, the private investigator, sat in my inbox like a loaded weapon. The subject line was simple: Jenkins dossier final. Attached was a PDF file that was 40 pages long. I took a sip of water. My throat felt dry. I knew Kyle was a liar. I knew he was a grifter. But I was not prepared for the sheer scale of the deception I was about to uncover. I double-clicked the file. The first section was titled Professional History, or rather the lack thereof. Kyle had spent the last 2 years posting photos of himself in high-end suits, standing in front of mansions. He tagged them with captions like "closing day" and "sold over asking." He built a persona of a top-tier real estate mogul who moved millions of dollars of inventory a month. The report dismantled this lie in a single paragraph. Kyle Jenkins has not held a valid real estate license in the state of Georgia for 26 months. His license was revoked due to ethics violations regarding the mishandling of escrow funds. I scrolled down. Henderson had included photos. One showed Kyle standing in a beautiful kitchen with a caption about his latest listing. Beside it was the actual listing from Zillow, showing the agent was a woman named Sarah, not Kyle. Kyle was just sneaking into open houses taking selfies when the real agent was distracted and posting them as his own work. He was playing dress-up. He was cosplaying success. But if he wasn't selling houses, where was the money coming from? How did he buy the suits? How did he lease the iPhone? How did he pay for the dinners he treated my mother to? I moved to the financial analysis section. This was where the story turned from pathetic to criminal. The report showed a series of deposits into Kyle's personal checking account over the last 6 months. They were not commission checks from a brokerage. They were personal transfers: Zelle, Cash App, Venmo. The names of the senders made my blood run cold. Martha Gable, $500. Beatrice Johnson, $1,000. Lucinda Patterson, $2,000. I paused. Lucinda Patterson. That was Sister Patterson. The same woman who had texted me hours ago, telling me I was going to hell for cutting off the heat. She was sending Kyle money. Why, I kept reading. Henderson had dug up a series of emails and group chat logs from a private Telegram group called the Kingdom Wealth Circle. Kyle was running a Ponzi scheme. He was pitching it to the church elders as a faith-based cryptocurrency investment fund. He promised them that he had a proprietary algorithm blessed by God that could turn their fixed-income Social Security checks into generational wealth. He used buzzwords he barely understood: blockchain, decentralized finance, yield farming. He was taking money from retired grandmothers and using it to buy fake designer watches and pay the minimum balance on his credit cards. And when one of them asked for a withdrawal, he would pressure a new victim to put money in using the fresh cash to pay the old investor a small dividend to keep them quiet. It was a classic house of cards. And judging by the frantic text logs Henderson had intercepted, the cards were about to fall. Investors were asking for their money back for Christmas shopping. Kyle was stalling. He was telling them the market was frozen. He was telling them the bank transfers were delayed. He was desperate. And that desperation explained everything. It explained why he was so angry about the car. It explained why he was so terrified of me cutting him off. He needed the appearance of wealth to keep the scam going. If he looked poor, the investors would panic. But the worst was yet to come. I reached the final section of the report. It was labeled Urgent Threat Assessment. Henderson had flagged a document that Kyle had accessed and printed from a local library computer 3 days ago. It was a PDF application for a reverse mortgage product from a predatory lending company known for high interest rates and aggressive foreclosure tactics. A reverse mortgage allows homeowners to borrow money against the value of their home. It is basically selling your house back to the bank in exchange for a lump sum of cash. The application was filled out in my father's handwriting, but the signature at the bottom was shaky. It looked coerced. The loan amount requested was $300,000. The beneficiary account listed for the wire transfer was not my parents' joint account. It was a brand new LLC called Jenkins Capital Management. I sat back in my chair, the breath knocked out of me. Kyle was trying to steal the house. He knew his Ponzi scheme was collapsing. He knew the church ladies were coming for their money. He needed a massive injection of cash to pay them off and keep the charade going. And he saw my parents with their paid-off home as a piggy bank. He had likely convinced them that this was a brilliant investment strategy. I could hear his voice in my head, slick and manipulative. Mom, Dad, you have all this equity sitting in the walls doing nothing. Let me unlock it for you. We can put it into the crypto fund. You will double your money in 6 months. We will buy a vacation home in Florida. We will show Dante who the real provider is. And because they were desperate to believe in him, because they were desperate to prove that their golden boy was better than their tech nerd son, they had agreed. They were going to sign over the deed to the house for $300,000, hand the cash to Kyle, and he was going to burn it to cover his tracks. But there was one problem. One massive, beautiful legal problem that Kyle in his arrogance had failed to check. My parents did not own the house. I did. The deed was in the name of Second Chance Holdings LLC, my company. If Kyle tried to file this paperwork, the bank would reject it immediately because the names didn't match. But Kyle was not stupid. He might try to forge a quitclaim deed. He might try to falsify records to show that my parents were the owners. Or more likely, he didn't know about the LLC at all. I had never told them the specifics. I just told them I handled the paperwork when I bought the foreclosure back from the bank 5 years ago. They probably assumed I put it in their names out of filial duty. This reverse mortgage application was a loaded gun pointed at my parents' heads. If they signed it, and if Kyle somehow managed to push it through with forged documents, they would be committing bank fraud. They would be accomplices to a federal crime. I looked at the date on the application draft. It was dated for December 31st, New Year's Eve. Kyle was planning to have them sign the final papers at the watch night service. It was the perfect cover, a spiritual setting, a new beginning. He would frame it as a step of faith. I felt a surge of nausea. He was willing to destroy my 60-year-old father and my diabetic mother just to save his own skin for a few more months. He was going to leave them homeless and bankrupt, facing criminal charges while he ran off with the money. And they were defending him. They were sleeping in the cold right now, blaming me, protecting the predator who was sharpening his knife to bleed them dry. I stood up and paced the room. I could call the police right now. I had enough evidence for wire fraud. I could send this report to the district attorney. But if I did that, Kyle would spin it. He would say he was framed. He would say I hacked the documents. My mother would believe him. She would say I was jealous. She would bail him out. The church would rally around him. No, I couldn't just tell them. I had to show them. I needed to let him walk into the trap. I needed him to stand up in front of everyone, hold that pen, and try to sign away a house he didn't own. I needed the world to see the moment the handcuffs clicked. I looked at the security feed on my second monitor. The house was still dark, but I knew they were in there. They were probably lighting candles, listening to Kyle tell them that everything was going to be all right, that the big deal was closing soon. I picked up my phone. I dialed Amanda, my lawyer. "It is Dante," I said. I read the report. She answered immediately. Her voice was sharp. "This guy is a walking felony, Dante." "I know. We need to stop him before he submits that mortgage application," Amanda said. "If he forges your signature or falsifies corporate records, it will be a mess to untangle." "We are not going to stop him," I said. "We are going to let him try." There was a pause on the line. "Dante, that is risky." "He is doing it on New Year's Eve," I told her. "At the church. He wants to make a spectacle of his success. He wants to announce that he is buying my parents a new life. So you want to crash the party?" "I want to end the party," I said. "I want you to draft a document for me. I need a complete property ownership history certified by the county clerk. I need the articles of incorporation for Second Chance Holdings showing me as the sole member, and I need a restraining order ready to be served." "I can have all that by tomorrow morning," Amanda said. "But what about the Ponzi scheme?" "The church members." "Leave that to me," I said. "I am going to bring the receipts." Literally. I hung up. I looked at the photo of Kyle again, the smug smile, the cheap suit. He thought he was playing chess. He thought he was 3 moves ahead because he had manipulated my mother's emotions. But he forgot that chess is a game of logic, not feelings. And on this board, I controlled every single square. My parents were about to lose everything: their pride, their reputation, their illusions. But if I played this right, I could save the one thing that actually mattered. I could save them from prison. I sat back down and opened a new email. I addressed it to Henderson. "Good work. Now I need one more thing. I need the contact information for the fraud department at the bank where Kyle is trying to secure this loan. And I need the name of the detective assigned to financial crimes at the Atlanta PD." I hit send. The room was silent again, save for the hum of the servers. I looked out at the city lights. "You wanted a blackout, Kyle," I whispered. "You have no idea what darkness really is. But you are about to find out." I turned off the monitors. The glow faded. I sat in the dark plotting the end of my brother-in-law's career. New Year's Eve was 5 days away. 5 days of cold for them. 5 days of planning for me. It was going to be a hell of a celebration. The silence in my apartment was a weapon I had sharpened for 3 days. While the internet raged with false accusations and my sister Ebony continued her tearful performance art on TikTok, I sat in the eye of the storm, perfectly calm. My living room was a command center. On the left monitor, I had the drafted eviction notices. On the right, the criminal dossier on Kyle Jenkins. In the center, a blank email draft where I was organizing the timeline of events that would destroy my brother-in-law's life. My phone buzzed against the marble countertop. It was 7 in the evening on December 30th. The caller ID simply read, "Unknown." I knew who it was. I had blocked every number associated with my family. Mom, Dad, Ebony, Kyle. Even the landline at the house. If they were calling, it meant they had bought a burner phone or were borrowing one from a stranger. I let it ring 3 times. I took a sip of my scotch, feeling the burn in my throat. I needed to be in the right headspace for this. I needed to be cold. I swiped answer and put it on speaker. "Hello," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "Dante, is that you, baby?" It was my mother. But the shrill, demanding tone from Christmas Eve was gone. In its place was the sugary, trembling voice she used when the pastor came over for dinner. It was the voice of the suffering saint. "Hello, Mom," I said. "I am surprised you are calling. I thought I was disowned." "Oh, Dante, don't say that." She sighed, the sound crackling over the line. Christmas was difficult. The devil was working hard in our house that night. We were all stressed. The enemy tries to break families apart, you know that. I leaned back in my chair. The enemy. That was her code for accountability. Whenever she did something cruel, it was the devil's fault. Whenever I reacted to that cruelty, I was the vessel for the enemy. "What do you want, Mom?" I asked. "I miss you, son," she said. "And your father misses you. We are worried about you. All this fighting the police, the internet, it is not us. It is not the Williams way." I looked at the screenshot on my screen of her standing next to Kyle while the tow truck took the Lexus, looking like she wanted to murder the driver. "I am fine, Mom. I am warm. I have food. You don't need to worry." "Dante, listen." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Kyle and Ebony, they are willing to forgive you." I almost choked on my drink. "They are willing to forgive me." "Yes," she said hurriedly. "We had a long prayer session last night." Kyle admitted that he might have been a little harsh about the turkey, "and we know you didn't mean to ruin the holiday. You were just hurt." Hurt people, Dante." I remained silent. I wanted to see where she was going with this. "So here is what the Lord put on my heart," she continued. "Tomorrow night is watch night, New Year's Eve service at the church. You know how important that service is to our family. We want you to come." "To church?" I asked. "Yes. We want to start the new year as a family, united. Bishop Henderson is going to be preaching on restoration. We want you to sit with us in the front row. We want to show the community that the Williams family is strong, that no weapon formed against us shall prosper." And then came the hook. "And afterwards, Kyle has a business proposition. He has found a way to fix everything, a way to pay you back for the cruise, for the car, for everything. He just needs your blessing. He needs you to stand with him." I closed my eyes. There it was. They didn't want reconciliation. They needed a co-signer. I looked at the reverse mortgage application on my screen, the one Kyle was trying to push through. The bank must have flagged it. They probably told Kyle that since the house was technically in a trust or LLC, even if he didn't know the specifics, they needed a guarantor with a high credit score and a verifiable relationship to the property to sign off on the bridge loan. Or maybe Kyle just needed me there to look legitimate. If the rumors of his Ponzi scheme were spreading, seeing the wealthy tech genius brother-in-law standing next to him would calm the investors. My presence was the collateral. "Mom," I said slowly, "you want me to come to church, sit next to the man who stole my identity, and then sign a business deal with him? I want you to come home." "Dante," she said, her voice cracking with fake emotion. "I want my son back. Kyle is family. He is trying to do right by us. He just needs a little help to get this big investment unlocked. He says if you just sign as a character witness or a guarantor, the bank will release the funds for our new future. He wants to buy us a vacation home, Dante. He wants to bless us." She was so delusional, it was almost tragic. She was sitting in a freezing house, probably wearing 3 sweaters, listening to a con artist tell her that a mansion in Florida was just one signature away. I should have said no. I should have told her to rot. But if I said no, they would just keep spinning the narrative. They would say I refused to reconcile. They would say I turned my back on God and family, and Kyle would find another way to scam them, maybe one that I couldn't track until it was too late. No, I needed to end this, and I needed witnesses. Okay, I said. You will come. She sounded shocked. Yes, I said. I will be there. Oh, praise God, she shouted. I knew it. I knew your heart wasn't hardened. Oh, Dante, thank you. Wear a suit, baby. A nice one. We are going to take a family photo for the church newsletter. A family photo. The final prop in their stage play. I will wear my best suit, Mom. And bring your ID, she added quickly. And maybe a checkbook. Just in case there are some fees for the transaction Kyle mentioned. But don't worry. He will pay you back double next week. I smiled a cold shark-like smile that she couldn't see. I will bring everything I need, Mom. I promise. I hung up the phone. The room went quiet again. I stood up and walked to the window. The city was preparing for New Year's Eve. Fireworks were being staged. Champagne was being chilled. People were getting ready to celebrate new beginnings. I was getting ready for an execution. I went to my closet. I pushed past the hoodies and the jeans. In the back, kept in a garment bag, was a bespoke Tom Ford suit I had bought for an awards gala last year. Charcoal gray, sharp as a razor blade. I pulled it out. Then I went to my safe. I spun the dial and opened the heavy steel door. I pulled out the deed to 124 Maple Drive. The original document stamped and notarized showing Second Chance Holdings LLC as the owner. I pulled out the articles of incorporation listing Dante Williams as the sole proprietor. I printed the 40-page dossier on Kyle Jenkins, the Ponzi scheme, the fake license, the theft from the church members. I printed the emails from the bank fraud department that I had received an hour ago, confirming that an application had been flagged for suspicious activity. I placed all of it into a thick leather portfolio. Then I grabbed one last thing, a gold fountain pen. Mom wanted me to sign something. She wanted me to sign a guarantee. She wanted me to validate Kyle's lies. She had no idea what I was actually going to sign. I sat back down at my desk and called Amanda. It is on, I said. They took the bait, Amanda asked. Hook, line, and sinker. Watch night service. First Baptist, 10 p.m. Do you want police presence? She asked. Not inside, I said. Have them waiting in the parking lot. I want this to happen on the altar. I want the congregation to see it. I want the people he stole from to see him fall. You are cold, Dante, Amanda said, but I could hear the admiration in her voice. They froze me out on Christmas, I reminded her. I am just returning the favor. I spent the rest of the night rehearsing. I knew exactly how it would go. The music would be loud. The preaching would be emotional. The bishop would call for unity. Mom would cry. Kyle would step up looking humble and redeemed, holding a microphone in one hand and a pen in the other. He would try to corner me. He would try to use the pressure of the crowd to make me sign. Come on, Dante. Do it for Mom. Do it for Jesus. Just a little signature to help the family. He thought he was the protagonist of this story. He thought he was the hero overcoming the jealous brother-in-law. He didn't realize he was the villain in a tragedy, and the final act had already been written. I looked at the file on my desk. I had labeled it The Nuke. Tomorrow night I wouldn't just be exposing a fraud. I would be freeing my parents. They would hate me for it. They would scream and cry when the handcuffs clicked. They would blame me for ruining their image. But one day when the fog lifted, they might realize that the son they slapped was the only one who loved them enough to tell them the truth. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would hate me forever. As I turned off the lights in my apartment, leaving only the glow of the city below, I realized I didn't care anymore. I wasn't doing this for their love. I was doing it for my own peace. I went to bed early. I needed to be well rested, because tomorrow I was going to church, and I was going to bring the fire. The First Baptist Church of Atlanta was vibrating. It was 10 o'clock on New Year's Eve, the night of the watch night service, and the sanctuary was packed with over 1,000 people. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume peppermint oil and the heavy humid heat of bodies swaying to the rhythm of the Hammond B3 organ. This was the most important night of the year for the congregation. It was a night to pray the old year out and pray the new year in. It was a night for miracles, for breakthroughs, and for performances. I stood at the back of the sanctuary, hidden in the shadows of the vestibule. I was wearing my charcoal Tom Ford suit. It fit me like a second skin, a suit of armor made of Italian wool. Under my arm, I held a thick leather portfolio. To anyone else, it looked like a Bible cover or a notebook for taking sermon notes. To me, it was the execution warrant for the man standing in the front row. I scanned the sea of extravagant hats and colorful suits until I found them. My family. They were sitting in the VIP section, the pew reserved for the deacons and high-ranking families. My mother, Patricia, looked immaculate in a cream-colored suit with a matching hat that rose like a Tower of Babel. She had her hands raised in worship, her eyes closed, looking like the picture of saintly devotion. Beside her sat my father, Otis, looking smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of his secrets was finally crushing his spine. And then there was Kyle. My brother-in-law was wearing a white suit. A white suit on New Year's Eve. He looked like he was trying to cosplay as an angel or perhaps a televangelist in training. He had his arm draped around my sister Ebony, who was filming the choir on her phone, likely live streaming the service to prove to her followers that the Williams family was still blessed and highly favored, despite the fact that they had spent the last 5 days shivering in a 40-degree house. I took a deep breath. The usher at the door, a young man named Marcus, who I had tutored in math years ago, looked at me. His eyes went wide. He recognized me. He had seen the video. He had seen the hate comments. Mr. Williams, Marcus whispered. I thought you weren't coming." I smiled at him. It was a polite, tight smile. "My mother invited me, Marcus. It is a time for reconciliation, right?" Marcus nodded, looking relieved. "That is good, man. That is really good. The bishop is preaching on restoration tonight. Go on in." I walked into the sanctuary. The heavy oak doors closed behind me, sealing me inside the arena. I walked down the side aisle, my footsteps silent, on the plush red carpet. I could feel the eyes of the congregation landing on me. The whispers started immediately rippling through the pews, faster than the Holy Spirit. "That is him. That is Dante. The one who froze his mama. Look at him walking in here like he owns the place. He looks expensive, though. Look at that suit." I kept my eyes forward. I did not look at Sister Patterson, who was glaring at me from the third row, clutching her purse as if I were going to snatch it. I did not look at the choir members who were nudging each other. I focused on the back of Kyle's head. I found a seat in the 5th row directly behind them, but just far enough away to be an observer. I sat down and placed the portfolio on my lap. Bishop Henderson took the pulpit. He was a charismatic man with a booming voice that could shake the stained glass windows. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief and gripped the microphone. Tonight he roared. "Tonight we are leaving the baggage of the past behind. Tonight we are stepping into our season of abundance. Some of you have been attacked by the enemy this week. Some of you have faced cold nights. Some of you have been betrayed by those closest to you." "Amen," my mother shouted, waving her hand. "Preach, Bishop." She turned slightly, making sure the people around her saw her tears. She was playing the role of the long-suffering matriarch perfectly. "But God," the bishop shouted, "God has a ram in the bush. God has a turnaround for you. And tonight we have a special testimony, a testimony from a young man who has faced the fire and come out as pure gold. A man who has stepped up to be the head of his household when others stepped away." The bishop gestured toward the front row. "Brother Kyle Jenkins, come on up here." The church erupted in applause. My stomach turned. They were cheering for a predator. They were clapping for a man who had stolen their retirement funds to buy the shoes on his feet. Kyle stood up. He buttoned his white jacket. He hugged my mother, then my father, then Ebony. He walked up the stairs to the pulpit with a swagger that bordered on blasphemy. He shook the bishop's hand and took the microphone. The organist played a soft, emotional chord progression in the background. Kyle gripped the podium, looking out over the crowd. He paused for effect, letting the silence build. "Praise God, everybody," Kyle said, his voice smooth and practiced. "Praise him," the crowd responded. "I want to thank Bishop Henderson for allowing me to speak," Kyle began. "This has been the hardest week of my life. As many of you know, my family came under attack this Christmas. The enemy tried to freeze us out. Literally. We faced darkness. We faced cold. We faced betrayal from a family member we loved and trusted." He looked down at his feet, feigning humility. "There were moments when I wanted to give up. When I saw my mother-in-law, this beautiful woman of God, shivering in her own living room because of the cruelty of a hardened heart. I felt rage. I felt despair." He looked up, his eyes shining with fake tears. "But then I remembered who I am. I am not a victim. I am a victor." The crowd cheered. "Hallelujah!" "And I realized that God was just testing me." Kyle shouted, his voice rising. "He was testing my faith. He was asking me, Kyle, do you trust me enough to sow in a famine? Do you trust me enough to lead this family to the promised land even when the lights go out?" And I said, "Yes, Lord." He paced the stage, now working the crowd. "And because I stood firm, God has opened a window of heaven. I wasn't going to announce this until next week, but the Spirit is moving me to share it now." He pointed to the ceiling. "This morning, my investment firm, Jenkins Capital, finalized a deal that is going to change everything. We are not just recovering what was stolen, we are multiplying it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He waved it in the air. "This is a purchase agreement. Not for a car, not for clothes, but for a brand new estate in Florida. A 7-bedroom sanctuary where my mother-in-law and father-in-law will never be cold again. A place where no one can cut the power because we will own the solar grid, a place paid for by the favor of God and smart biblical investing." The church went wild. People were standing up, dancing in the aisles. My mother was sobbing openly, lifting her hands to the ceiling. I sat perfectly still. I watched Kyle basking in the adoration. He was lying. There was no deal. There was no Florida estate. The paper in his hand was probably a prop, or worse, the fraudulent mortgage application he was about to try and get signed. He was using the church service as a sales pitch. He was signaling to all the investors in the room, the ones he owed money to, that the big payout was coming. "See, I am buying mansions. Your money is safe. Just wait a little longer." And Kyle continued, shouting over the applause. "We are not leaving anyone behind. We are building a legacy. My firm is opening a new round of funding for the faithful, because I want everyone in this room to have what we have." He was doubling down. He wasn't just covering his tracks, he was actively recruiting more victims to pay off the old ones. It was bold, it was reckless, it was criminal. But God is also a God of reconciliation. Kyle said, his voice dropping to a whisper. The organ music swelled. "We cannot move into the new house with old bitterness. We have to forgive. Even the unlovable. Even the ones who hurt us." Kyle looked directly at the section where I was sitting. He knew I was there. My mother must have texted him. "We invited a special guest tonight," Kyle said. "My brother-in-law, Dante." The room went silent. Heads turned, 1,000 pairs of eyes focused on me. "Dante. Are you here?" Kyle asked. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. I held the portfolio in my left hand. "There he is," Kyle said, smiling benevolently. "The prodigal son." My mother stood up from the front row. She grabbed a handheld microphone from a nearby usher. She turned to face me. "Dante," she cried out, her voice amplified through the speakers. "Come down here, baby. Come home." I stepped into the aisle. The walk to the front was long. Every step was heavy with the judgment of the crowd. I could hear their whispers. "Go on, son. Make it right. God is giving him a second chance. He doesn't deserve it, but God is good." I walked steadily. I kept my face neutral. I looked at my mother. She looked triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought the pressure of the church, the eyes of the bishop, and the atmosphere of worship would force me to bend. She thought I would crumble, apologize, and sign whatever check Kyle needed to keep his house of cards standing. I reached the front of the church. I stood at the base of the steps leading to the pulpit. Kyle looked down at me from the stage like a king looking at a peasant. My mother rushed over and hugged me. It wasn't a warm hug, it was a grip of steel. She leaned into my ear. "Do not embarrass me," she hissed. "Just say you are sorry and stand with Kyle." She pulled back and smiled for the cameras. "Dante," she said into the microphone, "we love you. We forgive you for Christmas. We forgive you for the cold. We know you were just confused. The devil got into your head. But tonight you can make it right." She gestured to Kyle. "Your brother-in-law has made a way for us. He has secured our future. All we need is for our family to be united." Kyle walked down the steps. He stood next to Mom. He held out his hand to me. "Welcome back, Dante," Kyle said loud enough for the microphone to pick up. "Be a man. Admit you were wrong. Apologize to the family and let's sign this agreement together. Let's start the new year rich." The bishop stepped forward. "Come on, son," he boomed. "Confession is good for the soul. Apologize to your brother and let God heal this breach." The pressure was suffocating. The entire room was chanting. "Apologize, apologize, apologize." They wanted me to bow. They wanted me to admit that I was the villain. They wanted me to validate the lie so they could all feel good about their own bad investments. I looked at Kyle's hand. It was sweating. I looked at his eyes. Beneath the arrogance, I saw fear. He needed this. He needed me to validate him right now, or the investors waiting in the pews would start asking questions. I looked at my mother. She was watching me with hard, expectant eyes. I looked at the portfolio in my hand. I reached inside my jacket pocket and pulled out my own microphone, a lapel mic I had brought from my studio equipment. I clipped it to my tie. I tapped it. The sound thumped through the church's PA system. I had hacked into their frequency 10 minutes ago from my phone. The sound engineer in the back booth scrambled, confused. I didn't take Kyle's hand. I stepped past him and walked up the stairs to the pulpit. Kyle turned around, confused. "Hey, what are you doing?" I stood behind the podium. I placed the leather portfolio on the wood surface. I opened it. The church went quiet. They expected a speech of repentance. They expected tears. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at Sister Patterson. I looked at the bishop. Then I looked at Kyle. "Apologize," I said, my voice calm, clear, and amplified. I looked at my mother. "You want me to apologize for being selfish. You want me to apologize to the provider." I pulled a document from the portfolio. I held it up. "I will apologize," I said. "I will apologize to everyone in this room who gave Kyle Jenkins money for his Kingdom Capital Fund. Because what I am about to show you is not a purchase agreement for a mansion in Florida." I looked directly at Kyle, who had turned a ghostly shade of pale. "It is a criminal indictment waiting to happen." The silence in the room shattered. Kyle lunged for me, cut his mic. But it was too late. I had the floor, and I had the receipts. "Let's look at the numbers, shall we?" I said. And I began to read. The feedback from the microphone was a sharp, high-pitched whine that cut through the tension in the sanctuary like a knife. I stood behind the plexiglass pulpit, looking out at the sea of faces. The silence was absolute. 1,000 people were holding their breath, waiting for the prodigal son to beg for forgiveness. I looked down at Kyle. He was standing at the base of the stairs, his white suit glowing under the stage lights. His smile was frozen, a rictus of terror masking his confidence. Beside him, my mother was nodding encouragingly, mouthing the words, "Say it." She wanted the apology. She wanted the submission. She wanted to win. I leaned into the microphone. My voice echoed through the massive hall, deep and steady. "I would like to start by saying, I am sorry," I began. A ripple of relief went through the room. I saw the bishop nod. I saw my mother close her eyes and lift her hands in victory. I saw Kyle's shoulders drop an inch as he relaxed. They thought it was over. They thought they had broken me. "I am sorry," I continued, my voice hardening, "because I have kept a secret from this congregation and from my own parents for 5 years. And that secret has allowed a predator to walk among you in sheep's clothing." My mother's eyes snapped open. The bishop froze. Kyle took a step forward, his smile vanishing. "Dante," Kyle hissed loud enough for the front row to hear. "Stick to the script." I ignored him. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out a single blue-bound document. I held it up to the light. "This morning I sent a digital copy of this document to the audiovisual team in the sound booth," I said. "If you could please put image number 1 on the main screens." The sound guy, a teenager named Marcus, who was terrified of disobeying a direct request from a man in a $3,000 suit, hit the button. Behind me, the massive projection screens that usually displayed hymn lyrics flickered to life. A high-resolution scan of a property deed appeared. It was magnified so every word was legible. "Deed of trust. Property address, 124 Maple Drive." The congregation murmured. They recognized the address. It was the Williams family home, the symbol of their status. "I want you all to look at the owner listed on this deed," I said, pointing to the screen. My mother turned around. She squinted at the screen. I watched the color drain from her face in real time. She expected to see Otis Williams and Patricia Williams. She expected to see the proof of her own success. Instead, in bold black letters, it read, "Owner Second Chance Holdings, LLC." "What is this?" Mom shouted, her voice shrill without the microphone. "What is Second Chance Holdings?" "I am glad you asked, Mom," I said. I signaled the booth. "Image number 2, please." The screen changed. It was the Articles of Incorporation for Second Chance Holdings, LLC. It listed the registered agent and the sole member of the company, Dante Marcus Williams. The gasp from the audience sucked the air out of the room. It was a physical sound, a collective intake of breath. 5 years ago, I said, looking directly at my father, who was shrinking into the pew. Dad made some bad investments. He gambled away his pension. The bank foreclosed on the house on Maple Drive. The eviction notice was taped to the door. My father put his head in his hands. My mother stared at him, horrified. She didn't know. He had hidden it from her. "I didn't want my mother to be homeless," I continued. "And I didn't want my father to be humiliated. So I stepped in. I bought the debt, I paid off the arrears, and I bought the house from the bank under my company name, so nobody would know that Otis Williams had lost everything. I gripped the podium. I let you live there rent-free. I paid the taxes. I paid the insurance. I let you pretend it was your house because I loved you. I let you walk around this church acting like you were blessed by financial favor, when in reality, you were being subsidized by the son you called a failure." "You are a liar," Mom screamed, stumbling toward the stage. "It is my house. I picked out the curtains. It is my house." "No, Mom," I said. "Coldell, you are a tenant, and as of 5 days ago, you are a tenant in default." Kyle ran up the stairs. He tried to grab the microphone from me. "Cut the feed!" he screamed at the booth. "He is lying. These are fake documents." I shoved Kyle back. He stumbled, his white suit looking ridiculous as he flailed for balance. "I am not done," I roared. The bishop stood up, looking unsure whether to call security or let the drama play out. The congregation was on its feet. Sister Patterson had her hand over her mouth. I pointed a finger at Kyle. We have established who owns the house. Now let's talk about what my dear brother-in-law is holding in his pocket. Kyle clutched his jacket pocket. He looked like a cornered rat. He told you all he was buying a mansion in Florida, I said. He told you he had a purchase agreement. I pulled another paper from my portfolio. Image number 3. The screen changed again. This time, it was a grainy photo of a document filled out in handwriting that everyone recognized. It was the document Henderson, the private investigator, had intercepted. This is a reverse mortgage application, I explained to the room. For those who do not know financial terms, this is a loan where you sell the equity of your home to the bank in exchange for cash. I walked around the pulpit, closing the distance between me and Kyle. Kyle Jenkins is not buying a house. He is trying to mortgage my house. I turned to the crowd. He filled out this application listing my parents as the owners. He forged their financial information. He set up the wire transfer to go directly into his personal LLC. He intended to have my parents sign this document tonight right here on this altar under the guise of a business blessing. I looked at Mom. She was frozen at the bottom of the stairs, looking back and forth between me and the screen. Mom, I said softly, he wasn't going to buy you a vacation home. He was going to steal the $300,000 of equity in the house you live in. He was going to take the cash, and when the bank realized the deed was in my name, they would have come for you. They would have arrested you for bank fraud. I pointed at the document on the screen. Look at the date, Mom. December 31st. Today. He was going to make you a criminal tonight. No, Mom whispered. No. Kyle wouldn't. He is a man of God. I turned to Kyle. He was shaking. Sweat was pouring down his face, ruining his makeup. Tell her, Kyle, I said. Show us the paper in your pocket. Is it a deed for a Florida mansion, or is it the signature page for a predatory loan on a house you don't own? Kyle backed away. You are jealous, he stammered, but his voice was weak without the microphone. You are trying to frame me. Frame you. I laughed. It was a harsh sound. Image number 4. The screen changed to the email from the bank's fraud department. Subject fraud alert. 124 Maple Drive. Body. We have flagged an unauthorized application submitted by a Mr. Kyle Jenkins attempting to leverage assets belonging to Second Chance Holdings, LLC. The text was 10 feet tall. There was no denying it. The church erupted. It wasn't just murmurs anymore. It was shouting. People who had given Kyle money were standing up, realizing the horror of what was happening. My money, someone shouted from the back. Where is my $5,000, Kyle? You said the returns were guaranteed, another voice yelled. Kyle looked at the crowd. The adoration was gone. The worship was gone. In its place was the angry mob he had created. I can explain, Kyle shouted, but nobody was listening. My mother walked up the stairs. She moved slowly, like she was walking underwater. She stood in front of Kyle. She looked at his white suit. She looked at the paper sticking out of his pocket. Let me see it, she said. Mom, don't listen to him, Kyle pleaded. He hacked the screens. It is deep fake technology. Let me see the paper, Mom screamed. She reached into his pocket and ripped the document out. She unfolded it. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. She read it. She saw the words, reverse mortgage. She saw the wire instructions to Jenkins Capital. She saw the line waiting for her signature. She looked up at Kyle. The betrayal in her eyes was total. This was the son she chose. This was the man she slapped me for. This was the man she let sleep in the master bedroom while I slept in my car. You were going to sell my house, she whispered. You were going to steal my home. It is not your house, Patricia. Kyle snapped his mask, finally slipping completely. He sneered at her. You heard Dante. You don't own anything. You are a broke old woman living on charity. I was trying to get some value out of that dump before he kicked us all out. The slap that echoed through the church was louder than the one she had given me on Christmas. Mom hit him with the force of 5 years of delusion shattering. Kyle stumbled back, holding his cheek. You devil, Mom screamed. You liar! She turned to me. Her eyes were wild, pleading. Dante, baby, tell me it is not true. Tell me I own my house. Tell me you didn't buy it. I looked at her. I felt a twinge of pity, but I crushed it. This was the lesson. It had to be complete. I cannot lie in church, Mom, I said. You don't own it. You haven't owned it since 2019. You are a guest. And Kyle just tried to rob your host. The bishop stepped in between us. He grabbed the microphone. Deacons, he shouted, security get control of this service, but there was no controlling it. The truth was out. The golden child was exposed as a thief. The matriarch was exposed as a fraud. And the scapegoat was standing at the pulpit, holding the keys to the kingdom. Kyle looked for an exit. He looked at the side door. He started to run. But I wasn't done. I stepped back to the microphone one last time. Kyle, I said, you might want to stay right there. Because there is one more group of people waiting to see you. I pointed to the back of the sanctuary. The heavy oak doors swung open. The flashing blue lights from the parking lot spilled into the church, cutting through the holy atmosphere with the cold reality of the law. Officer Miller and Officer Davis walked in. They weren't smiling. They were holding handcuffs. And behind them were two detectives in suits. Financial Crimes Division. The payoff was here. I watched Kyle's face crumble. He looked at me, and for the first time, he didn't see a nerd. He didn't see a bank account. He saw the architect of his destruction. Happy New Year, Kyle, I whispered. The police started walking down the aisle. The congregation parted like the Red Sea. My mother fell to her knees, weeping. My father sat in the pew, staring at nothing. I closed my portfolio. My hands were steady. The service was over. The justice was just beginning. The silence that had gripped the sanctuary shattered in an instant. It was replaced by a primal, animalistic roar that did not sound like it belonged in the house of God. It came from Kyle Jenkins. The white suit that he had worn like armor was now soaked in sweat, and the mask of the benevolent businessman had completely disintegrated. He looked at the projection screen where his crimes were displayed in high definition, and then he looked at me. In that moment, Kyle realized he had no moves left. He could not charm his way out of a bank fraud alert. He could not pray away a forged signature. He could not gaslight a room full of people who were staring at the evidence of their own swindled money. The cornered rat had turned into a rabid dog. "You are a liar!" Kyle screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched shriek. He abandoned the microphone. He abandoned the pretense of dignity. He lunged toward the stairs of the pulpit, his eyes wide and bloodshot, his hands curled into claws. "I am going to kill you," he yelled. "You hacked it. You fake everything." He took the steps two at a time, moving with a speed fueled by pure adrenaline and terror. The congregation gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. My mother screamed, her hands flying to her mouth. "Dante, run!" But I did not run. I did not flinch. I stood behind the plexiglass podium, my hand resting calmly on the leather portfolio. I watched him come. I watched the desperation in his eyes. I knew he would never reach me. Before Kyle could make it to the top step, a wall of muscle intercepted him. It was Marcus, the young usher I had spoken to earlier, along with two of the church's largest deacons. They had seen the violence in Kyle's eyes before he even moved. Marcus lowered his shoulder and slammed into Kyle, stopping his momentum cold. The white suit hit the red carpet with a dull thud. Kyle scrambled, kicking and flailing, trying to crawl past them to get to me. "Get off me!" Kyle shouted, spitting flying from his mouth. "He is the criminal. He is ruining my life. Let me get him!" The bishop stepped forward, his face thunderous. In all his years of preaching, he had never seen violence on his altar. "Restrain him!" The bishop commanded, his voice booming without the need for a microphone. "Hold him down!" The deacons pinned Kyle to the floor. His expensive white jacket tore at the shoulder seam with a loud rip. He writhed like a snake, cursing, crying, shouting obscenities that made the church mothers cover the ears of the children in the front row. I looked down at him from my vantage point. It was a pathetic sight. The man who had sat at the head of my table, who had mocked my job, who had stolen my car, was now pinned to the ground, reduced to a tantrum. "Is that the behavior of an innocent man, Kyle?" I asked into the microphone. My voice filled the chaotic room, cutting through his screams. "Innocent men do not attack the messenger," I said calmly. "They answer the accusations. But you cannot answer, can you? Because the answer is a prison sentence." Kyle looked up at me, his face pressed against the carpet. Hatred burned in his eyes. "You think you won," he hissed. "You think this is over. I will sue you. I will sue this church. I have lawyers." "You are going to need them," I said. I looked up toward the back of the sanctuary. The timing was perfect. The heavy double doors at the main entrance swung open with a force that rattled the hinges. The sound was like a gavel striking a sounding block. "Police," a voice shouted. "Nobody move!" The flashing blue and red lights from the parking lot poured into the sanctuary, painting the walls in chaotic strokes of color. The warm yellow glow of the church lights was washed out by the cold, harsh strobes of authority. 4 officers marched down the center aisle. Leading them were Detectives Harrison and Reynolds from the Financial Crimes Division. I recognized them from the briefing I had arranged. They were not wearing uniforms. They were wearing cheap suits that looked far more intimidating than the expensive one Kyle was wearing because they carried the weight of the state. Behind them were Officers Miller and Davis, the patrolmen who had handled the car repossession. They had asked to be here. They wanted to see the end of the show. The congregation parted like the Red Sea. People scrambled into the pews to get out of the way. Sister Patterson clutched her purse to her chest, her eyes wide as saucers. The choir stopped swaying. The organist took his hands off the keys. The only sound was the heavy rhythmic thud of police boots on the floor and Kyle's ragged breathing. My mother stood frozen at the front. She looked at the police, then at Kyle, then at me. Her world was collapsing in real time. She tried to step toward the detectives, her instinct to protect her image kicking in. "Excuse me," she said, her voice trembling. "Officers, you cannot come in here. This is a church service. We are in the middle of worship." Detective Harrison didn't even slow down. He walked right past her as if she were a ghost. He kept his eyes locked on the man pinned to the floor. "Kyle Jenkins?" the detective asked. The deacon stepped back, allowing Kyle to sit up. He looked at the police, and for the first time the fight left him. He scrambled backward, crab walking across the carpet until his back hit the wood of the pulpit stage. I am a victim here," Kyle stammered. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "That man. He hacked my accounts. He is framing me." Detective Harrison pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. He snapped it open. "Kyle Jenkins. I have a warrant for your arrest, issued by the district attorney's office." "For what?" Kyle squeaked. The detective began to read, his voice flat and bored, reciting a laundry list of destruction. "You are charged with 4 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, 1 count of bank fraud, and 1 count of operating an unlicensed security." Kyle shook his head violently. "No. No, that is a mistake. It is a crypto fund. It is unregulated. You cannot arrest me for bad market performance." "We are not arresting you for bad performance, son," the detective said, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "We are arresting you because we traced the wire transfers from Mrs. Lucille Johnson and Mrs. Beatrice Davis directly to your personal DraftKings gambling account." The gasps from the audience were audible. "Gambling?" someone shouted. "You gambled my retirement money." The detective stepped forward. "Stand up. Hands behind your back." Kyle didn't stand up. He curled into a ball. "Mom," he screamed. "Mom, help me. They are lying. Don't let them take me." My mother flinched. She took a half step forward, her hand reaching out. This was the boy she had championed. This was the man she had chosen over her own son. But then she looked at the projection screen where the evidence of him trying to sell her house was still glowing. She looked at the faces of her friends and the congregation people who had been robbed. She stopped. She dropped her hand. She turned her face away. Officer Miller and Officer Davis stepped in. They grabbed Kyle by the arms and hauled him to his feet. He was dead weight, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please," Kyle begged. "I am a businessman. I have a deal closing next week. I can pay it back." "Just give me a week. You have the right to remain silent," Detective Harrison recited, spinning Kyle around. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud in the quiet church. Click, click, click. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Kyle slumped. The white suit was ruined. His reputation was incinerated. And then the screaming started. But it wasn't Kyle. It was Ebony. My sister had been standing near the choir stand, holding her phone, paralyzed by shock. But as the handcuffs went on, the reality of her situation hit her. She wasn't screaming for her husband. She wasn't screaming for justice. She was screaming for herself. "No," Ebony wailed, throwing her phone to the ground. It smashed into pieces. She ran toward the police, but not to stop them. She ran to the center of the aisle and fell to her knees, creating a scene that rivaled any soap opera. "My life is over," she shrieked, tearing at her hair extensions. "Look at what you did. Look at what you did to us." She pointed at me. Her face twisted into an ugly mask of narcissism. "You did this on purpose. You waited until tonight. You wanted to embarrass me." "How am I supposed to show my face?" "Everyone is watching. I am an influencer. You ruined my brand." She didn't ask if Kyle was guilty. She didn't ask about the victims. She only cared that her perfect, curated life had been exposed as a lie. I looked down at her from the pulpit. "Your brand was built on stolen money, Ebony," I said into the microphone. "It wasn't real. None of it was real." "You are jealous," she screamed, sobbing into the carpet. "You are a lonely, miserable incel, and you hate that we were happy." "Were you happy?" I asked. "Or were you just expensive?" Ebony beat her fists against the floor. My mother rushed to her, kneeling down to wrap her arms around her daughter, but even Mom looked defeated. She held Ebony, rocking her back and forth, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She wouldn't look at the congregation. She knew the whispering had already started. She knew that tomorrow the Williams family would be the talk of the town, but not for the reasons she wanted. The detectives began to march Kyle down the center aisle. It was the longest walk of his life. As he passed the pews, the people he had scammed stood up. "Give me my money," Kyle, an old man, shouted, shaking his cane. "You promised me I could pay for my surgery," a woman yelled, tears streaming down her face. Kyle kept his head down, sobbing, his shoulders shaking. Officer Miller stopped near the back of the church. He looked back at me. He gave a subtle nod. It was a professional acknowledgement. The file I had sent them, the evidence I had compiled it, was bulletproof. I watched them push Kyle through the double doors. The blue lights swirled one last time, casting long, dancing shadows against the back wall, and then the doors swung shut. He was gone. The sanctuary was left in a stunned, vibrating silence. The projection screen still showed the fraud alert. The organ hummed softly, a low note that sounded like a funeral dirge. I closed my portfolio. I unclipped the lapel microphone from my tie. I looked at my father, Otis. He was still sitting in the pew. He hadn't moved during the entire arrest. He hadn't tried to save Kyle. He hadn't comforted Mom. He just stared at the empty space where the golden child used to be. He looked up at me. His eyes were tired. There was no anger in them anymore, just a profound, hollow sadness. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. It wasn't forgiveness, it was recognition. He finally saw the truth. I picked up my portfolio and walked down the stairs of the pulpit. The congregation parted for me as I walked up the aisle. This time there were no whispers. There was only a heavy, respectful silence. I passed Sister Patterson. She didn't glare at me. She looked down at her hands ashamed. I reached the back of the church. I didn't look back at my mother and sister who were still crying on the altar floor mourning the death of their delusions. I pushed open the doors and stepped out into the cold night air. The police cruiser was pulling away Kyle's silhouette visible in the back seat. I took a deep breath. The air was freezing, but it felt clean. It felt like the truth. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from my security system at the house. Motion detected driveway. I checked the camera. It was a tow truck. Not for the car this time, but a moving truck. The bank had apparently wasted no time once the fraud alert was triggered. Or maybe it was just a glitch. It didn't matter. I walked to my car. The show was over. The bad actor had been removed from the stage, but I had one last scene to play. The eviction. I got into my Tesla and set the navigation for Maple Drive. The arrest was the explosion. Now I had to go clear the rubble. It was almost midnight. The new year was coming. And for the first time in 5 years, the books were finally going to be balanced. The blue lights of the police cruiser faded into the distance, taking Kyle Jenkins to a place where his white suit would be swapped for an orange jumpsuit. The heavy oak doors of the church swung shut, sealing the rest of us inside the sanctuary. The show was over, but the business meeting was just beginning. The congregation had mostly dispersed, murmuring and shaking their heads as they hurried to their cars, eager to gossip about the fall of the Williams family. Only a few people remained. The bishop stood near the altar looking weary and confused. The janitor was sweeping up the broken pieces of Ebony's phone. And in the front pew, my family sat like statues carved out of regret and shock. I stood at the pulpit for a moment longer, looking down at them. My mother, Patricia, was weeping into a handkerchief, her shoulders heaving with the theatrical sobs of a woman who knows she has lost her audience but is still trying to play the victim. My father, Otis, stared blankly at the cross hanging behind the choir loft, looking small and defeated. Ebony was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, staring at the spot where her husband had been handcuffed. I walked down the steps. My footsteps on the red carpet were the only sound in the vast room. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. For years I had walked toward them with a checkbook in my hand, desperate to buy their love, desperate to fix their mistakes. Tonight I was walking toward them with something else, something far more valuable. I stopped at the end of their pew. Mom looked up. Her mascara was running down her cheeks in black streaks. When she saw me, her expression shifted. It went from despair to a sudden, desperate hope. She stood up and wiped her face. "Dante," she sniffled, reaching out a trembling hand. "Oh, Dante, thank God you are here. Thank God you saw through him." She took a step toward me, her eyes pleading. "Did you see how he tricked us?" she asked, her voice rising in pitch. "He fooled everyone, Dante. He fooled the bishop. He fooled the church. He even fooled your poor mother. I had no idea. I thought he was a businessman. I thought he was trying to help us." She was pivoting. I had to admire her survival instinct. Less than 10 minutes ago, she had slapped Kyle for trying to steal the house, but before that, she had been ready to disown me again to please him. Now that Kyle was gone, she was trying to rewrite history. She was trying to align herself with the winner. I stood perfectly still, keeping my hands in my pockets. I did not reach out to comfort her. "He was a monster," Mom continued, gaining confidence from my silence. "He tried to steal our home. He tried to make me a criminal. Can you believe that, my own son-in-law? I am just so glad you were smart enough to stop him. You saved us, Dante. You saved the family." She smiled weakly, waiting for me to nod, waiting for me to say, "It is okay, Mom. I will take care of it. I will fix this too." Ebony stood up as well. She wiped her eyes and looked at me. "Is he really going to jail?" she asked, her voice raspy. "Yes," I said simply. "For a long time." "Good." Ebony spat. "He ruined my life. He embarrassed me in front of everyone. Dante, you have to help me get an annulment. And I need a new phone. The police stepped on mine when they grabbed him. You have to buy me the Pro Max tomorrow morning so I can tell my side of the story before the blogs pick it up. I looked at them. The audacity was breathtaking. They had just watched a man get arrested for fraud. They had just been exposed as complicit in his lies. And their first instinct was to ask me for things. A new phone, a new narrative, a return to the status quo where I paid for everything and they treated me like garbage. I reached into the inside pocket of my charcoal suit jacket. Mom's eyes lit up. She recognized the motion. It was the same motion I made whenever I pulled out my checkbook to pay for a vacation, a car repair, or a medical bill. She thought I was reaching for a pen. She thought I was going to write a check to smooth everything over. I knew you would help, Mom breathed, relaxing her shoulders. We need to get the heat turned back on at the house immediately. And we probably need to change the locks since Kyle has keys. You can handle that tonight, right? I pulled out a thick white envelope. It was sealed. It was heavy. I handed it to her. She took it with both hands, treating it like a holy sacrament. She felt the weight of the paper inside. "What is this?" she asked, a hopeful smile playing on her lips. Is it the deed? Did you transfer the house back to us?" "Open it," I said. She tore open the envelope. Her hands were shaking. She pulled out the document. It was a single page typed on formal legal stationery, with a red stamp at the bottom. She squinted at the text. The church lights were bright, illuminating every word. "Notice to vacate," she read aloud. She stopped. She frowned. She read it again. "Pursuant to Georgia Property Code, tenant is hereby notified to vacate the premises located at 124 Maple Drive within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in formal eviction proceedings." She looked up at me. The smile was gone. Her face was pale, her mouth slightly open. "Dante, I don't understand. What is this?" "It is exactly what it says, Mom," I said calmly. "It is a 30-day notice. I am terminating your tenancy." She laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "You are joking. This is a joke, right? To teach us a lesson. Okay, we learned. Kyle is bad. You are the boss. Very funny. Now tear it up and let's go get some dinner. I am starving." "I am not joking," I said. "And I am not going to dinner with you. You have 30 days to pack your things and leave my house." The reality hit her. She dropped the envelope. The paper fluttered to the red carpet. "You can't do this," she whispered. "We are your parents." I looked at my father. He hadn't moved. He was staring at the paper on the floor. "Dad," I said, "you have your Social Security. You have a small savings account that Kyle didn't manage to touch yet. It is enough to rent a small apartment, maybe a one-bedroom in Decatur." "Decatur!" Mom shrieked. She stepped forward and grabbed my lapels. "Decatur! I live in Buckhead. I live in a colonial mansion. I am Patricia Williams. I cannot live in an apartment." "You can and you will," I said, removing her hands from my suit. "How can you be so cruel?" she screamed, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "After everything we have been through tonight, after we were victims of a crime, you are kicking us while we are down." "I didn't kick you," I said. "I stopped you from being arrested. That was my gift to you. The eviction is my gift to myself." "I am your mother," she yelled. "I gave birth to you. I raised you. The Bible says honor your father and mother. How are you honoring us? By throwing us on the street in the middle of winter?" I looked her in the eye. "I honored you by paying your debts for 5 years. I honored you by letting you live in a house you lost. I honored you by keeping your secrets. And how did you honor me?" I pointed to the spot on the floor where she had stood earlier. "You stood right there and told the whole church that Kyle was the provider. You slapped me in the face on Christmas Eve because I bought the wrong turkey. You watched your husband steal my car and you called the police on me when I took it back." "That was the devil," Mom cried. "That was the stress." "No, Mom," I said softly. "That was you. That was who you really are. You value appearances more than you value your son. You value a liar in a white suit more than the man who made sure you had heat. But we apologized, Ebony shouted, standing up. We said we were sorry. What else do you want? Blood. I don't want anything. Ebony, I said. That is the point. I don't want your apologies, I don't want your excuses, and I definitely don't want to pay your phone bill anymore. I turned back to Mom. She was shaking now, not from cold, but from rage. The mask of the victim fell away, revealing the narcissist underneath. You are ungrateful, she hissed. You think because you have money, you are better than us. You are nothing. You are just a lonely little boy with a computer. You will never be a man like Kyle was. Kyle had ambition. Kyle had dreams. Kyle is in handcuffs, Mom, I reminded her. And the only reason you aren't in handcuffs next to him is because I own the house you were trying to steal. I took a step back. You have 30 days, I repeated. January 30th. If you are not out, the sheriff will come. And unlike the police tonight, the sheriff won't be there to arrest a scammer. He will be there to set your furniture on the curb. Where will we go? Dad asked. It was the first time he had spoken. His voice was cracked and dry. I looked at him. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike. I remembered him working double shifts. But I also remembered him sitting silently while Mom abused me. I remembered him signing that fraudulent application because he was too weak to say no. I don't know, Dad, I said. You are a grown man. You figure it out. Dante, please. Mom grabbed my arm again. Her nails dug into my suit fabric. Baby, please. I am sorry. I will do anything. I will tell the church how great you are. I will cook you dinner every Sunday. Just don't take the house. It is all I have. It is my identity. I looked down at her hand on my arm. You said something to me on Christmas Eve, I said. Do you remember? She blinked, confused. You stood in the dining room while I was holding the receipt for your credit card debt, and you said, paying the bills doesn't make you family. Mom's face crumbled. She remembered. I gently pried her fingers off my arm. I have thought about that a lot for the last 5 days, I said. And I realized you were right. You were absolutely right. Paying the bills does not make me your son. It makes me your financier. It makes me your safety net. I straightened my jacket. So I am resigning from that position. I agree with you, Mom. We are not family. I pointed to the paper on the floor. I am the landlord. You are the tenants. And you have been terrible tenants. You damaged the property. You harassed the owner. And you tried to mortgage the building behind my back. The lease is terminated. I turned around and started walking up the aisle. Dante, Mom screamed behind me. Dante, come back here. You will go to hell for this. God will punish you. I kept walking. I passed the pews where the investors had sat. I passed the sound booth where Marcus gave me a thumbs up. Dante, you are dead to me. Do you hear me? Dead. Her voice echoed in the empty church, bouncing off the stained glass windows. It sounded small. It sounded powerless. I reached the heavy oak doors. I pushed them open. The cold night air hit my face. It was crisp and sharp. It smelled of rain and pavement. I walked to my car. I didn't look back at the church. I didn't look back at the people who had drained me dry for 30 years. I got into my Tesla. I sat there for a moment in the silence. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Amanda, my lawyer. Did you do it? I typed back 2 words. It is done. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the church parking lot. For the first time in my life, I didn't know where I was going for Sunday dinner. I didn't know who would call me on my birthday. I didn't know what it felt like to have a mother who loved me. But as I drove onto the highway, watching the city lights blur past, I realized something else. I also didn't know what it felt like to be used anymore. And that feeling was worth every single penny I had lost. I was an orphan by choice, and I had never felt more alive. 6 months have passed since I walked out of that church into the cold night air. People often ask me if I regret it. They ask if I miss them. They ask if the silence of a house without parents or siblings feels lonely. I'm sitting on the balcony of a private chalet in Aspen, Colorado. The air is crisp and thin. The mountains are covered in powder white snow that glitters like diamond dust under the winter sun. Inside, a real wood-burning fireplace is crackling, filling the room with the scent of pine and warmth. My fiancé, a brilliant corporate attorney named Sarah, who I met shortly after the trial, is laughing in the kitchen with two of my closest friends from the tech world. We are drinking hot cocoa not because we are freezing and desperate, but because we are happy. So to answer the question, no, I do not feel lonely. For the first time in 30 years, I feel complete. The house on Maple Drive is gone. I did not keep it as a trophy. I did not keep it as a rental property. I sold it 2 weeks after the eviction notice expired. I sold it to a nice young couple who had no idea about the drama that had soaked into the drywall. I sold it for under market value just to get it off my books quickly. Signing that deed over to strangers was the most liberating moment of my life. It was not just a transaction, it was an exorcism. I washed my hands of the mortgage, the maintenance, and the memories. My parents did not leave gracefully. When the 30 days were up, they were still there, surrounded by boxes, waiting for a savior who never came. They called me 50 times that day. I did not answer. The sheriff arrived at noon. It was not a violent scene, just a pathetic one. The neighbors watched as the custom furniture Mom loved so much was loaded into a rental truck. There was no white Lexus in the driveway. There was no grand exit. Just an Uber XL and a lot of tears. They live in Decatur now. It is a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near the highway. It is not dangerous, but it is loud. The walls are thin. There is no granite in the kitchen. There is no heated floor in the bathroom. It is a perfectly adequate home for 2 people living on a fixed income, but to my mother, it is a prison. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Mom tried to go back to the church a few times. She wore her best hat. She tried to sit in her usual pew, but the reception was frosty. The community felt betrayed. They looked at her and saw the woman who enabled a predator. They saw the woman who slapped her son. The status she had worshipped, the reputation she had sacrificed her family to protect, had evaporated. She stopped going after a month. Now she sits in her small apartment watching old sermons on TV, telling anyone who will listen that she is the victim of a jealous son and a misunderstood son-in-law. My father has grown quiet. He got a part-time job as a greeter at a hardware store to help make ends meet. I think in a way he actually likes it. It gives him a reason to leave the apartment. It gives him a break from Mom's constant complaining. He sends me a text message once a month, usually just 2 words. I hope you are well. I never reply. I am well, and I think he knows that my silence is the only peace I can offer him. Then there is Ebony, the influencer, the star, the girl who needed a new iPhone to tell her side of the story. Her TikTok account has been deleted. The comments became too much for her to handle once the court documents regarding Kyle's fraud were made public. There is no filter strong enough to fix the reality of being married to a felon. She works at a grocery store now. I saw her once from a distance when I was in town closing the sale of the house. She was wearing a green apron scanning items at the checkout lane. She looked tired. She looked older. She was scanning a bottle of wine for a customer, and for a second I saw her pause and look at the label. It was a cheap bottle, not the vintage stuff Kyle used to pretend to buy. She put it in the bag and kept working. She is living with our parents, sleeping on a pull-out couch, using her paycheck to put money on Kyle's commissary account in prison. Kyle took a plea deal. 5 years in federal prison for wire fraud and identity theft. He tried to write me a letter from jail. He said he found God. He said he wanted to make amends. I burned the letter without opening it. I know Kyle. He didn't find God. He found a new angle, and I am not buying what he is selling ever again. As for me, my life has expanded in ways I never imagined. When I stopped pouring my energy and resources into a black hole of ingratitude, I found I had so much more to give to the people who actually mattered. I started a mentorship program for young coders from underprivileged backgrounds. I invested in real businesses, not fake crypto funds. I built a circle of friends who don't care about my bank account, but care about my character. Sarah walked out onto the balcony and handed me a mug. She wrapped her arm around my waist and rested her head on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. I looked out at the mountains. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of gold and violet. It was the same colors as the scarf I bought my mother that Christmas. The scarf she threw on the couch. "I am thinking that it is finally over," I said. She squeezed my hand. "It has been over, Dante. You are just finally letting yourself enjoy the quiet." She was right. The war was over. I had won. But the prize wasn't the house or the money or the vindication. The prize was this moment. The prize was the ability to breathe without feeling a weight on my chest. I took a sip of the cocoa. It was sweet and warm. Family is a strange word. We are taught that it is a bond that can never be broken. We are taught that blood is thicker than water. But I have learned that blood is just biology. Loyalty is a choice. Love is an action. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who only love you for what you can provide. I pulled out my phone one last time. I opened the gallery. I scrolled past the photos of the old house. I scrolled past the old life. I selected them all. Delete, confirm. The screen went black for a second, then refreshed. Now it was filled with photos of Aspen, photos of Sarah, photos of my team winning a hackathon, photos of a life that belonged to me. I put the phone away and turned back to the warmth of the chalet. If you are watching this and you feel trapped by obligation, if you feel like you are setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, let this be your sign. You can stop. You can walk away. You can turn off the lights on their drama and turn on the sun for yourself. It might be cold for a little while. It might be lonely. But on the other side, there is peace. And that peace is worth more than any mansion in the world. My name is Dante. I used to be a scapegoat. Now I am just free. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to make the hard choice to choose yourself over your family, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of truth and resilience. Stay warm, everyone, and Happy New Year. This journey taught me that blood is merely biology, but loyalty is a choice. For years, I believed that if I just paid enough bills or fixed enough problems, my family would finally respect me. I was wrong. You cannot buy the love of people who only value you for what you provide. True peace began the moment I stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. Walking away from toxic family wasn't an act of cruelty. It was an act of survival. Your worth is not defined by how much abuse you can endure, but by the boundaries you are brave enough to build. If you have ever had to choose your own peace over family expectations, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience. Share your own experiences in the comments below. I read every single one.